New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, so we will bring those comments to you when we get them. Prior to the break, we were speaking with our good friend Bill Rhodes. Bill's the president and CEO of William Rhodes Global Advisors. He was former chairman at Citibank. We were talking about the outsized effect likely to have on emerging markets from the coronavirus. And Bill, we were discussing kind of a global response. Does there really need to be a global response to help out some of these emerging markets, which may have, limited capabilities to kind of take care of their own populations?
I think without a doubt, there needs to be something more done than the G20 has done. I think the IMF and World Bank are looking at announcing additional programs, although they are now talking about programs that they've never done before. And so you have to have a united response through the G20 rather than a one-off type situation. And then just to change it for a moment, when you take a look at the EU and the EC, it's the situation that the EU is going through, who have been major suppliers of aid to a lot of these countries. They are in a difficult situation themselves. I mean, Spain's had over 21,000 deaths. Italy, very similar. And they are struggling to keep the EU together and talking about a rescue package for those countries of a trillion to $1.5 trillion euros. And this type of thing will also help the emerging markets because that will push, I think, the G20 to do more if their own economies are being taken care of to help the emerging markets. But this is the most difficult period I can remember for the emerging markets in my lifetime.
In your lifetime, you mean more even than the Latin American crisis?
More even than the Latin American crisis, Asian financial crisis, any of them, because this is coming out of nowhere. And a lot of these countries, at least as you and I have discussed with Paul in the past, have borrowed very heavily in foreign currencies to support their economies. And with a strong dollar, this is going to be a real problem. So I think you're going to have a wave of debt restructurings are also going to hit the emerging markets. And they're going to be very, very difficult because the creditors themselves have problems. So we're in for a very, very difficult, strained period, without a doubt. And then, of course, a number of these countries are oil exporters. Venezuela, Brazil, I could run through them, a number of countries in Africa. And they're going to be hard hit because of the collapse in the price of crude and the price of oil. So all told, it's going to be a very difficult period for the emerging markets in the immediate future.
There's also a question of China's role in financing some of the developing world. We've heard, they don't report the numbers, but there are billions of dollars of loans that China has extended throughout that entire world. How does that complicate efforts to restructure some of these debts?
I think it's a very important point, Lisa, because, the One Belt, One Road program, which Xi Jinping has been pushing for the last 7 or 8 years, has led hundreds of billions of dollars to these countries, and a lot of the terms are not clear. And one of the concerns is how the Chinese are going to push these countries to repay. And so far, the Chinese haven't announced any sort of program of debt forgiveness. They're talking about taking assets in these countries or stretching it out. The other thing, since you mentioned China, which I think we have to keep in mind, is remember in the Great Recession, the country, and you have to give them their due, that helped pull the world out of what could have been a Great Depression was China, because they pushed anywhere from $800 billion to $1 trillion into the markets because their financial system was very strong on commodities, in particular, benefited construction. This is why Brazil and a number of the emerging market countries were able to get through, because they were able to sell their commodities to China. Well, the Chinese, because of their high debt load, are no longer in a position themselves to pull the world out. So we can't look for any particular savior at this point. That's why the work of the G20 needs to be worked out in an orderly fashion, because no one country is going to pull us out.
So, Bill, I kind of always, when I think about emerging markets, people tell me the IMF is there, but I always feel like the IMF is fairly limited in their resources, and it will come down to the G20 or maybe even the United States of America. How do you think the U.S. what do you think the U.S. will have to do here as we think about the emerging markets in terms of support?
Well, That's a good question, because it's not clear where Trump stands on this, where President Trump stands on this. And you're right about the IMF. Even with the additional resources they're trying to put in, one of the suggestions had been they go back to the idea of having a special drawing rights. But so far, the G7 countries haven't agreed to that, including the United States, which would beef up their ability to help these countries. So the United States is very key. The two countries, or let's say the three entities, are key to the revival of the emerging markets: the United States, China, and the EU.
Bill Rhodes, thank you so much for being with us. We always love hearing your insights. A really important time to be getting them. Banker to the World, Bill Rhodes, author of the book that is Banker to the World. I recommend you read it. It is a fascinating read. He is also the president and chief executive officer of William Rhodes Global Advisors and a senior advisor to Citigroup. I mean, it's really an amazing perspective to have, Paul, given the restructurings that he's been involved with in a number of different places. Right now, we are looking at emerging market currencies that have been clobbered. I mean, this has been a really rough year for them as the dollar has remained ascendant, although you are seeing a little bit of a reprieve from that now. Meanwhile, across markets, you're seeing that rally continue to gain steam. The NASDAQ leading the way, up 2.1% with a slew of tech earnings still to come next week in particular, right, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw some good numbers out of Netflix and Snap, actually virus aided, if you will, just given the change in people's behavior. But next week on the technology, I think we're going to hear a lot about the cloud. We're seeing more and more companies ramp up even more their investments in the cloud as people work remotely, and we change maybe the way we work.
Yeah, and it's been the biggest test you could ever imagine of the movement to the cloud. And by all accounts, It's largely been successful. I mean, the idea that you could have these incredible thousands of people-sized staffs that can all move remotely, Wall Street entirely moving remotely, is impressive. And we're going to probably see that from Amazon with their AWS cloud service provider in the lead. Also, Microsoft reporting next week, their Azure coming in as a close second. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague Paul Sweeney. Coming up, we're going to talk more about the earnings. Netflix reporting yesterday, smashing all expectations, yet still predicting a rocky road ahead as the world still reels from the pandemic. This is Bloomberg.
That saying, success breeds success?
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. But only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brimah, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
On the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we will bring you D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. We'll get the latest on the coronavirus and its impact on the nation's capital. Plus, we're going to speak to George Ferguson, senior aerospace analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, get his thoughts on Delta. They reported some numbers, as well as the outlook for the beleaguered airline industry. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg?
Paul, stocks are staying in the green, halting that two-day slide as investors are looking at the latest round of corporate earnings. They also appear to be more optimistic about the eventual reopening of the economy. Oil is up from record lows, but it's not really doing that great. We'll check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 1.75%, up 47. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 1.5%, up 360, and the Nasdaq is up 2.1%, up 174. The 10-year is down 12.30 seconds with a yield of 0.60%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 30% at $15.12 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 2.4% at $17.2780 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 107.82. The euro is $1.827, and the British pound $1.2328. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's regulator says it will let the mortgage giants buy new loans that have entered forbearance in an effort to ease market disruptions as borrowers miss monthly payments because of the coronavirus crisis. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much for that. Right now, let's turn our focus to small and mid-cap shares. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, joining us. The theme for the year, broken down a little bit over the past few sessions, has been the underperformance of small and mid-cap shares. What are we seeing today?
Is back and forth today, Lisa. You've got the Russell 2000 index up 1.3%. Which is fine, except the S&P 500 is higher by 1.7%. So smaller companies trailing larger ones yet again. That said, one of the Russell's biggest gains belongs to Healthcare Services Group, whose ticker is HCSG. The provider of food services and housekeeping has risen almost 17%. First quarter earnings and revenue beat analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. Neon Therapeutics, ticker NTGN, has climbed more than 13%. The drug developer is a target of an all-stock takeover offer from Germany's BioNTech, which has risen 11% in U.S. trading. BioNTech and Pfizer received German clearance to begin a COVID-19 vaccine trial. The Russell's steepest decline belongs to VBI Vaccines, ticker VBIV. It's down 27.5% after selling $50 million of stock at a discounted price. The sale was equivalent to a 21% stake. And Profina, ticker PRTA, has dropped 8.3%. A Parkinson's treatment that the company has been pursuing with Switzerland's Roche Holding failed in a mid-stage study.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Lisa, I'm looking at some of these airline stocks. We've been talking about them really since the beginning of the crisis, really one of the first groups to get hit the hardest. Delta year to date. These are all year to date numbers. Delta down 60%, United down 70%, American down nearly 70%. So just getting decimated. We had some numbers out of Delta. Let's get the latest. We welcome Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Aerospace Analyst George Ferguson. He's been covering the space for decades. George, thanks so much for joining us. What did we learn here from Delta with the numbers?
Hey, good morning. I think what we learned is that the way forward is very unclear, I think is what we learned. And they burned a bit more cash than we had expected. They're working very, very hard to bring down cash burn every day. They think they can get themselves to $50 million of cash burn per day by the beginning of May, which I thought was quite interesting. And they confirmed when asked about forward bookings, they confirmed that we continue, I think in a direct quote from Delta Management, we continue to bounce along the bottom about 5% of what we did last year. You know, that's the number of people sort of flying this year. Just people that absolutely have to fly. Demand is about zero. So
demand about zero. The question is,
sobering.
And when the discussion on the earnings call is not about earnings at all, but just how they can stay alive for the foreseeable future, do we have a sense of how long the big airlines can continue to bleed cash until the economy gets back up to at least even half pace or a fraction of what it once was?
Yeah, so Delta did actually, give give a sense for how long they thought they could survive, and I actually thought that was actually also something quite interesting. They thought they could survive till the end of the year. We'd have to dig deeper into some of those assumptions. They definitely have to raise some more money to hit their target for where they want to be for cash at the end of the second quarter. But I think in the next. For 2Q and 3Q, the discussion is really going to be at all the major airlines about how much they can get cash burned down. I would say they told us 33% of their employees, I have to make sure that number was right, took voluntary leave, right? So they're really trying to lay off that labor cost pretty hard and get cash burned down. Remember, Delta, though, was one of the better positioned airlines going into the downturn. They were investment grade. They've been digging through the balance sheet to find anything and everything that they could use for collateral for loans. And so that means that if they can survive at the end of the year, others can't.
So, George, give us a sense, just a snapshot, how the industry did in terms of fiscal stimulus, getting money, support from the government, what they've gotten and what maybe they're still trying to get?
Yeah, so Delta said they got, I think it was $2.7 billion in already. I mean, really where we are, I think is very interesting as you look at the industry. The government has provided them grants, and they provided them an opportunity for loans. And the grants are really to support the payment of employees for the next 2 quarters. And so everyone is lined up to take the grants. Why wouldn't you? But the loans... And again, those will just cover employee costs. The loans they could take out for 5 years, but for those 5 years plus an additional year, a year after the loan has been paid off, they can't pay dividends, they can't buy back shares, and they have to limit employee compensation, especially for highly compensated employees. People over $3 million get sort of specific caps. And so we're sort of seeing a number of them. It looks like Southwest, it looks like Delta, it looks like United contemplate these loans from the government, but not take them yet. They have time to take them. And I think they're trying to figure out, again, how bad this downturn is going to be, because none of us really know whether they can weather the storm without these loans, whether there's other loan opportunities in the marketplace, so they don't have to hem themselves in with those, return cash to shareholder sort of options, as well as employee compensation. So there's more money coming, potentially $25 billion in loans to the industry. I'm not sure they all want to take it.
George Ferguson, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sure a year ago, if we thought that we would be having this conversation, it would have been fictitious or absolutely out of the question. And yet here we are, George Ferguson, senior aerospace, defense, and airlines analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Delta, which has been one of the stronger players consistently, shares down 61% year to date, even as they say they can survive through the end of the year. And presumably at some point, there will be a resurgence in global demand for travel, although for right now, it's basically nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, it's really eerie. I live, again, in a flight path for Newark Airport. Usually there's planes going over all the time. Absolutely nothing. There's occasionally a FedEx or UPS jet, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it's the same story here. All those sort of, those noises that you'd hear of the jets flying overhead have all gone away. Right now, let's head down to our 1991 studios in Washington, D.C., dissecting the landscape of the U.S. Congress. Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Lisa, the coronavirus may have begun spreading in the U.S. sooner than health officials had previously thought. The medical examiner's office in Santa Clara County, California, says 2 people who died in their homes on February 6th and the 17th tested positive for COVID-19. That is nearly 3 weeks before the first reported deaths in Washington state on February 26th. Dr. Colleen Kraft is Associate Chief Medical Officer at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta.
Well, I think that it's something that isn't a total surprise, given the fact that the community spread happened a lot more rapidly once we found it.
And now the Centers for Disease Control is warning a second wave of coronavirus could be worse than the first because it could arrive around the same time as flu season. CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield tells the Washington Post federal and state governments need to stress the importance of social distancing as they lift stay-at-home orders. He says they need to massively scale up testing for coronavirus and contact tracing. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says he thinks most, if not all, of the U.S. economy could restart by the end of August. He offered that prediction in an interview this morning with Fox Business Network. That is as the House prepares to pass another $484 billion in stimulus funding. That includes about $320 billion in additional small business aid. The family of Stephen Hawking has donated his ventilator to help treat patients with the coronavirus. The famed physicist's daughter Lucy says the equipment is at the Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, where her father received his medical care during his life. Hawking died in 2018 after unlocking the secrets of the universe unbowed by a debilitating form of Lou Gehrig's disease. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the
I can find and find my car.
Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on. Choose findandfundmycar.com.
Tonight, it's a Lotto triple rollover. Don't miss out. Play your numbers online or on the app today. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Oh. Just there, Dave. Smashing. Great.
Really?
Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
In D.C., Muriel Bowser, mayor of the district, is giving her daily press briefing. Let's listen in.
Which many people won't remember, but it's a fairly new entity in Washington, D.C. I think 5 years ago, or now 6 years ago, when I became mayor, we had a fledgling public health lab, and under Dr. Smith's leadership and the support of the D.C. Council, we have been able to make incredible investments in the district's health lab. So thank you for your leadership there. Thank you. Her team is working long hours behind the scenes, 7 days a week to support COVID-19 testing in our city, and we are very grateful for what they're doing. My first testing update is around our rapid point of care instruments. We've talked about these. I'm sure you've read about these instruments in the news. The rapid Abbott ID Now, and we plan to deploy these instruments to be used in 6 homeless shelters, or I should say 6 to be used in homeless shelters, 2 at our DOC facilities, 2 at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, 1 at Tamari Center, and also at least 1 going to long-term acute care and skilled nursing facilities. This week, personnel at these facilities are being trained by DFS, and the instruments will be delivered later in the week. The goal is not to replace the other methods of testing that are available, including larger sampling that could be sent to the public health lab, but it adds another tool that will help in the strategic decision making around quarantine and isolation at these facilities and give the people there immediate access to those tests. Second testing update is that tomorrow we are opening an additional public testing site in addition to the UMC site that is supported by the District of Columbia. We will be adding a site at UDC at the Bertie Backus campus in Ward 5, which is just across the street from the Fort Totten Metro. This site will be open on Tuesdays and Thursdays and will operate like the UMC site. It will be walk-through and drive-through. Residents need to schedule an appointment, and to get an appointment, they would call 1-888-363-0333. So we continue to look for ways to expand testing, and this is an additional way to do that. In addition to opening this new site, DC Health is expanding the criteria, priority groups for testing to allow some asymptomatic individuals who have a history of exposure and are in high risk groups to be prioritized for testing. So we're making the eligibility requirements broader and adding the site at Bacchus. And I know that Dr. Nesbitt would want us all to remember if you have COVID symptoms or otherwise feel ill, and if you don't even think there are COVID symptoms but you feel ill, you want to reach out to your doctor or call your testing hotline. Even if you're not coughing or you don't have a fever but you don't quite feel right, talk to your doctor and let your healthcare professional help you decide about testing for COVID. Before we turn to questions, we want to give a brief update on unemployment benefits. Last week, I told you that we have dramatically increased the number of call takers at our DOES call center. And here are some of our latest numbers. Since March 3rd, DOES has paid over $90 million to nearly 34,000 people. DOES has started paying out the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, or PUA. The additional $600 per week is part of the CARES Act, and that is reflected in these totals. You see here a weekly assessment of the number of claims filed, and of those claims, the number of individuals paid by week. So we continue to work through all of the people who have applied in our awaiting assistance from unemployment. And Dr. Morris Hughes will go through and also be available to answer any questions, and particularly talk about frequently asked questions that we're getting and frequently encountered problems that we're seeing with some of the claims that hopefully we can avoid when people are filling out their claims. So that's where we are with unemployment. We told you that actually I think that we're a couple of days ahead in being able to accept the PUA. So I want to thank all the men and women at DOES for the hard work that they're doing. I had a chance to walk through the call center last week, and we appreciate volunteers from DC government that are pitching in with their colleagues at DOES. So thank you for that. We also want to make employers in the district aware this week that they can apply for the shared work program. And Unique can talk a little bit more about this, but this program basically allows employers to avoid layoffs by reducing hours and sharing what is left of the work amongst all employees. Employees can then collect unemployment benefits to replace the part of money that they lost with reduced work hours. So this allows the employees to keep their jobs and continue to access benefits, and it helps employers avoid the cost of having to rehire and train new workers. And finally, I want to share that workers will be able to apply for PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, through DOES by Friday, April the 24th. This is going to provide financial relief to people not otherwise eligible for regular unemployment. I think the last time we were here, I showed you the big pamphlet that we have around unemployment that ask a lot of the frequently asked questions that answers them. And that is available on our website at coronavirus.dc.gov. But it very clearly lays out the difference between
We were listening to Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser giving us her press briefing today on what's going on with the virus within the District of Columbia, really focusing on the unemployment benefits that city residents can claim if they've lost their jobs resulting from the virus right now. Let's get you a quick data check before we move on. We still have a green on the screen here. We have the S&P up 54 points. That's 2%. The Dow up, holding that 400-point gain, up about 418 points here. That's 1.8%. That's 23,438 on the Dow. NASDAQ leading the way in terms of percentage performance today, up 2.3%. That's 193 points on the NASDAQ, putting it at 84.57 on the back of some of those good tech numbers right there. So good day in the markets after a pretty steep sell-off over the last couple of days as we start to parse through some earnings. And, of course, tomorrow will be another jobless claims number, looking for another big number. So we'll bring that to you tomorrow. Right now, let's switch gears and talk about those markets. We can do that with Samir Samana. Samir is Senior Global Market Strategist for Wells Fargo Investment Institute. Wells Fargo has about $1.6 trillion under management. He's based in St. Louis, actually. Samir, thanks so much for joining us. So let's just start. You know, the markets have been extraordinarily volatile, but let's just start with oil. What did you make of the performance of oil and the tremendous volatility, the negative pricing that we've seen in oil this week?
Sure. Oil, at least the front-month contract that went negative for, a very brief period of time was really impacted by, storage shortages that then, led to a lot of futures holders basically realizing that, they're going to either have to take physical delivery or they need to, promptly get out of the contract, which is what led to those negative prices. I think oil, some of the out-month contracts is probably one of the few markets, at least right now, that most accurately reflects kind of what's going on with COVID-19 and just how quickly a stoppage in economic activity that we've seen that will only slowly resume. Now, again, it should trade at positive levels, but I think it is telling you that the recovery will be, neither swift and the divot won't be all that shallow.
All right, so Samir, let's start there. What are the good folks at Wells Fargo? What's kind of your base case for kind of how this economy will shake out? I mean, I don't hear the V recovery spoken about too much recently. I think most people are kind of thinking about, some kind of U-shaped recovery where it might last several quarters, or maybe even something even more dire. What's the folks at Wells Fargo thinking?
Sure. So we would say, the second quarter will probably be the worst quarter from a growth standpoint. And then the third quarter will be, pretty bad, but maybe not as bad as the second quarter as things slowly start to come back online. And then hopefully by the fourth quarter of this year and first quarter of next year, there's some stability. And, we think there will be some payback, especially on the earnings front for corporations by the end of next year. So hopefully that's how it works. As far as whether it takes a U shape or, I've heard some people refer to it as a swoosh. It's still kind of to be seen. It'll depend, mainly on how quickly things come back online, whether there's a redux in the fall of new cases and whether there's additional stoppages. But I think probably the takeaway is second quarter will probably be the worst of it, and then we'll start to see hopefully a slow recovery by the end of this year that will pick up steam into next year.
Interesting. So we've had a really sharp rebound. I'm just talking about the U.S. equity markets here. A really sharp rebound off of that. What was about a 32%, peak to trough pullback that we saw back in March. Do you think the snapback rally has been too much too soon, or do you kind of figure it's kind of the beginning of a bottoming process for the equity markets?
So it's a little of both. We would say, this is part of the bottoming process. You tend to have kind of the big drawdown, and then you tend to have an equally spectacular kind of snapback, right, which kind of sucks everybody back in and makes them think that, the initial drawdown was the one that, maybe wasn't right, and, we're kind of off to the races. And what folks will realize in the coming months and quarters is that the bottoming process is more of a marathon than a sprint. And what you tend to have as kind of the second and the longer phase of the bottoming process is the one where you spend quite a bit of time in a wide, volatile range trying to figure out, one, what the exact economic and earnings outlook looks like, and then two, what valuation level or multiple you may want to pay on those earnings. So we would kind of settle in here, and we think, right here in the 2,800 to 2,900 that we've seen the last few days, it's probably the upper end of the range. It's probably pretty close to fair value. So here we would be pulling back on lower quality areas like energy, materials, industrials, emerging market equities, developed market equities, small cap equities. This is the time to kind of pare back if you were lucky enough to get in close to the lows, and then you kind of wait until we see, hopefully, in our opinion, a level at least south of 2,600, because before we get below 2,600, we're not sure we see a whole lot of value in chasing these markets, and really, as you get closer to 2450, that's where you maybe want to kind of pick up steam in terms of buying areas such as information technology, communication services, consumer discretionary, financials, and then large cap and mid cap equities in the U.S.
All right, Samir, so we've seen the Federal Reserve be fairly aggressive, I would call it, on some of their movements here in terms of injecting liquidity into the marketplace. We're starting to we've gotten some fiscal stimulus. It looks like we're going to get another package in the next several days. Is this something that the markets have to have, and absent an aggressive fiscal stimulus, you're less confident in the ability of the market to kind of bottom here and maybe start building?
We're appreciative of what the Fed and Congress have done. It probably removes some of the left tail risks, some of the downside scenarios that could play out are probably removed by their actions, by their swift actions. That being said, again, they can't quite, manufacture a vaccine out of thin air or make folks go out after work or go out on weekends. I mean, China's a great example, right? Where, there's good data now that shows during the week, things are 80 to 90% back to where they were, prior to the coronavirus. But then when you look at weekend levels of activity, they're only, a tenth or, 20% of where they were pre-coronavirus. And what that shows you is, people are willing to go to work in order to, get a paycheck. But what they're not willing to do is spend discretionary time or money outside the home quite yet. And that's, what makes a large part of the U.S. economy. And so the Fed will support asset prices. They will help provide a little bit of a bridge to the other side of this. That being said, much of that volatility will come from what we see as just, again, a real impairment in the short run in terms of consumption.
Hey, Samir, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your commentary and your thoughts. Samir Samana, Senior Global Market Strategist at Wells Fargo Institute. We are waiting New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for his daily press briefing. We will bring that to you when we get it. But right now, let's head to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have for us?
Well, the S&P is rebounding a bit, Paul, from that worst sell-off in 3 weeks, mid-quarterly results that did spark speculation a recovery could be sooner than anticipated. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up over 2%, up 55. The Dow is up 1.8%, up 416. And the NASDAQ is up 2.3%, up 190. A 10-year is down 13.30 seconds, the yield 0.60%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 27.25% at $14.72 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 2.5% at $17.30 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.84. The euro's $1.0828. The British pound $1.2324. Sycamore Partners wants to terminate its deal to acquire a controlling stake in lingerie brand Victoria's Secret from L Brands. Shares of L Brands were halted after plunging in New York trading. Sycamore Partners agreed in February to buy 55% of the lingerie chain. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are awaiting comments from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, his daily press briefing. We will bring those to you when we get them. Probably the earnings story of the day was last night's report from Netflix. And this is a company where investors really focus on subscriber growth. And boy, are a lot of people subscribing to Netflix. To bring us the latest, we welcome Laura Martin. She's a senior analyst at Needham & Company. She's been covering media and technology for decades. She's seen it all, but I don't think you or I have seen a pandemic like this that really changes consumer behavior. Laura, what did you make of those Netflix numbers last night? Really, really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. So, the guidance that they'd given was for 7 million ads globally, and the consensus was sort of 8.2 million ads. And they actually reported 15.8 million subscriber ads in the quarter as people went into lockdown, live sports ended, you couldn't go to restaurants or cinemas. And without anything to do and locked in your four walls of your home, an extra 8 million people signed up for Netflix last night.
It's interesting, Laura. So one of the challenges that they also highlighted on their letter that I read was just the fact that TV and movie production is pretty much shut down globally. Now, that's got to be a big issue for not just Netflix, but all media companies. What did Netflix say about that last night?
Yeah, that was actually a key learning from their call, Paul, which was because they drop every episode simultaneously, their lead times are much longer than normal episodic TV like CBS. So they will have an uninterrupted release schedule for 2020 because everything for 2020, even The Crown, which is a fourth quarter release, is already done. It's in the can. So they're working on editing, but you can do that from your house.
Hey, Laura, I'm sorry, Laura. I have to interrupt you right now. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo speaking. We're going to go listen to him. Andrew Cuomo.
Since 53 days since this nightmare happened. It's such a disorienting period, 53 days. Is it a long time or is it a short time? Well, if you look back, compared to what other generations have gone through, other periods of crisis in this country, 53 days is nothing. We've dealt with really intense, terrible situations for a long time in the past, but it feels very long and it's very stressful. And that's across the board. You have families that haven't had a paycheck come in a couple of months, and meanwhile the bills keep coming in. That's tremendous economic anxiety and insecurity. And by the way, it's exactly right. When do I go back to work? When do I get another paycheck? And that's a pressure that people feel in the household. Even the good part of it, well, my family's together. I have all my 3 girls, in my case, with me, and that's nice, and that's good news. But you put even the family together, and you lock them up, cabin fever, and everybody has their own stress that they're dealing with, and everyone's trying to figure out their life, and they're all together in this intense period. Even that is stressful. I feel it in my own household. My daughters are getting tired of my jokes, believe it or not. How that can happen, I have no idea, but somehow they manage to do that. We even have trouble now picking a movie at night because the rule is if you pick a bad movie, then you are on movie probation. You don't get to pick the next movie. Everybody is on movie probation in my house now, so that's a problem. Even the dog, Captain, is out of sorts and relating to stress. Maybe there's too many people in the house and he's having trouble adjusting. Captain doesn't like the boyfriend. I said I like the boyfriend, so it's nothing that I said, but all sorts of tension that people are living with. Real tension, and then just the day-to-day stress. So, yes, it's a terrible period of time. I get it. But we have to deal with it. And when you look at the reality of the situation, we are actually in a much better place. We're not home yet, but we're in a better place. The really bad news would have been if we concluded that we couldn't control the spread of the virus. That was a possibility. You looked at all those initial projections. How do you know that we could control the spread? We could have done all those close down measures, and it didn't work. And the spread continued. That would have been bad news. So relatively, we're in a relatively good place. In downstate New York, the curve is on the descent. The question is now, how long is that descent? Is it a sudden drop-off? Is it 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks? We don't know. But better to be going down than to be going up, right? Let's keep that in mind. And we are going down. How fast? We'll find out. But we're in a better place. Hospitalization numbers are coming down. Intubations are coming down. Number of new people going into the hospital every day is still troublingly high, but better than it was, but still problematic. Number of lives lost is still breathtakingly painful, and the worst news that I have to deliver every day, and the worst news that I've ever had to deal with as governor of New York. But at least it's not going up anymore, and it seems to be on a gentle decline. But make no mistake, this is a profound moment in history. Our actions are going to shape our future, and you're not going to have to wait for a 10-year analysis, a retrospective, to find out how our actions affected our future. What we do today, you will see the results in 3, 4, or 5 days, okay? You tell me what the people of this state and this country do today, you will see the results in the number of hospitalizations in just a few days. We get reckless today. There are a lot of contacts today, unprotected contacts today. You'll see that hospitalization rate go up 3, 4, 5 days from today. It is that simple. And it's that pressing that every decision we make is going to affect how we come out of this, how fast we come out of this. So in this moment, more than any other, truth, not what you would like to see, what you hope to see, not emotions, truth and facts. Truth and facts. That's how we operate here in the state of New York. Truth and facts. Give me the truth and give me the facts. And that has to guide our actions, period. We had a productive meeting at the White House yesterday, productive visit, sort of everybody says productive visit. Very few people come out and say unproductive visit, right? What does that mean, productive visit? To me, a productive visit means we spoke truth, we spoke facts, we made decisions, and we have a plan going forward. And that was accomplished yesterday. And I feel good about it personally, because it's what should have happened, right? The big issues on the table. In the political process, well, he said this, she said this, and you get into a he said, she said, or you get into a blame game, finger pointing. But the meeting was very productive. And by the way, these are people in the White House who politically don't like me. You know, that's the fact, right? You see the president's tweets. He's often tweeted very unkind things about me and my brother. Politically, he does not. We've had conflicts back and forth. But we sat with him, we sat with his team, and that was put aside. Because who really cares how I feel or how he feels? Who cares? Get the job done. I don't care if you like him or he likes you. It's we're not setting up a possible marriage here. Just do the job, right? When you're at war, you're in a foxhole. Nobody says, well, do you like the person you're in the foxhole with? Who cares? You protect the other person in the foxhole, then you get out of the foxhole and you take the hill, charge up the hill. And that's how we should be operating now. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you think about my politics. It doesn't matter. We both have a job to do. Let's do the job. And that was the spirit of the meeting yesterday. And it was very productive on what were very contentious, unclear issues. So it was very good. The main issue was testing, which I'll talk more about in a second, but we also talked about state funding. All the governors are united, Democrat and Republican, National Governors Association, every governor is saying the same thing. We have to have state funding. The states are all basically in a deficit situation, and we need funding from Washington. They've passed bills that help a lot of Americans, that's great. Help small businesses, that's great. But you have to help state governments, because state governments fund people that the federal government can't fund. You know, state and local governments, we're funding police, we're funding fire, we're funding teachers, we're funding schools. You can't just ignore them. And when you don't fund the states, then you're saying to the states, well, you have to fund them. And the states have already said in one united choir, we can't. We can't. So we talked to the president about that. The president gets it. The president says he's going to work very hard in the next piece of legislation. But, you know, I've been in Washington. I was there for 8 years. The Congress has to insist that this is in the legislation. And yes, they passed funding for small business and funding for testing, and that's good. That is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But it's not enough either. And they don't come back every day, the Congress. It's hard to get them to come back. And this was not the time for baby steps. This is when you should be taking bold action, right? The action is proportionate to the issue. And you haven't had a problem that is any bigger than this that any of those senators or Congress people have ever dealt with. Well, then your action should be proportionate and responsive to the problem. And it wasn't. The president also agreed, which is a big deal for New York, to waive what's called the state match for FEMA. Normally, a state has to pay 25% of the FEMA cost. That would be a cruel irony for New York and adding insult to injury. New York had the highest number of coronavirus cases in the country. Therefore, our cost of FEMA was the highest cost in the nation, and therefore New York should pay the highest amount. How ironically cruel would that be? You're going to penalize us for having the highest number of coronavirus cases in the country. And at the same time that Congress passed a piece of legislation not even funding the states. So the president agreed to waive that, and that is a very big deal. That's hundreds of millions of dollars to the state of New York. But the big issue was testing. And we've been talking about testing, tracing, and then isolating. And that is going to be the key going forward. That's how you are educated and have some data points as you're working your way through this reopening calibration, right? How does it work? You test the person. If the person winds up positive, you then trace that person's contacts, contact tracing. You have to start with a large number of tests. And we set as a goal yesterday to double the number of state tests, to go from 20,000 on average to 40,000. That is just about the maximum capacity for all of the laboratory machines in the state. Okay, we have private labs, about 300 of them, that we regulate. They have purchased machines over time. These are very expensive machines. If you took every machine we had and they had all the supplies they needed from the national manufacturers, and you ran that machine 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, how many tests could you do? About 40,000. So that's, if you put your foot to the floor, you brought the engine up to maximum RPM, up to the red line, you brought it up to 6,000, assuming the red line was 6,000. And you held it there 7 days, 24 hours a day at red line. How many tests could you do? 40,000. Now, there's a lot of buts and ifs in there. But the machine has to stay together for 7 days, 24 hours a day. You have to have enough people feeding the machine, but that is our maximum potential. So where did we set the goal? At our maximum potential. Why? Because we need to. Well, it's unrealistic. Might be a little unrealistic, but I'd rather set the bar high and try to get there, and then whatever we get is what we get. But once you do all those tests, every positive you have to go back and trace. And the tracing is a very big deal. Once you trace and you find more positives, then you isolate the positives. They're under quarantine, they can't go out, they can't infect anybody else. This entire operation has never been done before. So it's intimidating. You've never heard the words testing, tracing, isolate before. No one has. We've just never done this. There are a few textbooks that spoke about it, but we've never done it. And we've never done it anywhere near this scale. So it is an intimidating exercise. But I say, so what? Who cares that you've never done it? That's really irrelevant. It's what we have to do now. So figure out how to do it. Well, we have to put together a tracing army. Yes. Okay, we put together armies before. Never a tracing army. But we can put together people, we can organize, we can train, and we can do it. And yes, it's a big deal, but it's what we have to do, and it's what we will do. We want to operate on a tri-state basis. I've spoken to Governor Murphy in New Jersey, who's doing a great job, and Governor Lamont in Connecticut is doing a great job, and who have been very great neighbors to New York. It's best to do this tracing on a tri-state area. Why? Because that's how our society works. The virus doesn't stop at jurisdictional boundaries. Whoop, I'm at the town of Brookhaven, I stop here. No, the virus doesn't say that. The virus just spreads. And you look at the spread pattern of the virus, it is in a metropolitan area. So we'll work together. This is going to be a massive undertaking. Good news is Mayor Michael Bloomberg has volunteered to help us develop and implement the tracing program. Mayor Bloomberg was mayor of New York City, as you know, 3 terms. As governor, I worked with Mayor Bloomberg. He has then developed an organization. He works with mayors all across the world, literally, in providing them guidance. He has tremendous insight, both governmentally and from a private sector business perspective in this. Remember, his company, Bloomberg, they went through the China close down, open up. They went through the European close down, open up. So he's had quite a bit of experience in this area. It's a very big undertaking, and we thank him very much for taking it on, because it is going to require a lot of attention, a lot of insight, a lot of experience, and a lot of resources. We're also going to be partnering with Johns Hopkins and Vital Strategies in putting together that tracing operation. It'll be coordinated tri-state and downstate. Why downstate? Because again, downstate operates as one area. About 25%, 30% of the workforce that goes into New York City comes from outside of New York City. I have a house in Westchester. I work in New York City. Who's supposed to trace me? Westchester or New York City? If I turn up positive, yeah, my residence is in Westchester County. But I work in New York City, and I would have contacted many more people in New York City than I did in Westchester. Because that's where, if I work in New York City, that's where I'm contacting people. I live in Suffolk, but I work in New York City. I'm a police officer who has a house in Rockland, but I work in New York City. I'm a firefighter who lives in Rockland or Orange, but I work in New York City. I live in New Jersey, but I work in the city. I live in the city, but I work in Connecticut, right? So all those interconnections, if you're going to do these tracing operations, you can't do it within just your own county, because you'll quickly run into people who are cross-jurisdictional. So understand that going in. Blur the governmental jurisdictions because they don't really make sense. Put everybody together, work together. Harder done than said, but 100% right. There's no doubt about that. We're going to take the initial tracers that people have now. The state has about 225 today. Rockland is 40, Westchester is 50, Nassau 60, New York City 200. They're going to work together. Mayor Bloomberg is going to start with that core, but we have to build on that because we will literally need thousands. SUNY and CUNY have 35,000 medical students that we're going to draw from, but we have to put together a significant operation because the numbers get very big very quickly here. Today is also the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. When you look at many of the numbers that we're finding and you look at the disparity between the African American community, Latino community that has a higher rate of infection than people in the white community, you start to ask why, and you start to study those health disparities. You also find that in those areas where the coronavirus infection rate is higher, they tend to be minority areas. And by the way, those minority areas tend to be the places where we cited plants that pollute. The asthma rates, respiratory illnesses are 3 times higher among people in the African American community.
We've been listening to Andrew Cuomo, governor of the state of New York, giving us his daily press briefing on the COVID-19 virus, talking about statistics that we've come to rely upon. They continue to show positive movement, kind of bending the curve, if you will, kind of coming down the other side in terms of hospitalizations, intubations, even deaths, which Andrew Cuomo said continues to be, much too high at the moment. Also announcing that former Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who is the owner, founder of Bloomberg LP and this radio and TV station, will be heading up an effort to lead up the tracing and the testing and tracing aspect, which is going to be the next big way for the state to really try to get a handle on this virus and stop it in its tracks so we can get the state opened up. It'll be a tri-state effort in terms of that testing and tracing. So we got that news today, and I'm sure we'll learn more of that going forward. So coming up on Bloomberg Radio, Balance of Power with David Weston. He will carry the conversation forward. He has Speaker Nancy Pelosi coming up right at noon. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Yesterday was just one of those days. I was running late to dinner, so I had to do my makeup on the bus. But my favourite shirt got ruined when I spilt my foundation all over it. What a mare. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, Save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Stay in touch with your loved ones with great phones at great prices from Tesco Mobile. Like the incredible iPhone 7 with advanced HD front camera. Perfect for video calling. For just $13.99 a month. That's our lowest ever price. Search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 14th of June. Was £15.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston, and we're going to start today with a very special guest. She is Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, coming to us from the Capitol. Madam Speaker, thank you so much for joining us on a very busy week. You have a big package, spending package now, pending before the House after the Senate passed it, $484 billion. Do you have any doubt that the House will enact it this week? And do you need to do anything extraordinary, such as proxy voting, to get it done?
No, we will be able to, in a very strong bipartisan way, to pass the legislation as it passed in a bipartisan way in the Senate. It's nothing extraordinary about how we will vote. Pretty standard fare, but we will take a recorded vote. In the Senate, they had unanimous consent, so they need a few senators to be there. We're 430 members now, and we'll need to have a quorum and a majority to get it passed, but we will.
An awful lot in this bill, something like $370 billion to replenish the PPP program, including through some smaller lenders, $75 billion for hospitals, another $25 billion for testing. What is not in the bill that you think still needs to be done?
Well, first, let me just say how pleased I am with what is in the bill, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so. 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of Treasury called me and said he needed $250 billion in 48 hours. That would mean that by tomorrow, 2 weeks ago, the Republican leader went to the floor and said it's $250 for the program, and that's it. We're not making any other additions. We objected. The Democratic senators objected. We worked together for our proposal. They objected to that, made a counter proposal, which was resoundingly rejected by the Republicans. And for 1 week, they refused to negotiate until about last Thursday. Then they realized that they had no chance just to do the $250. There was so much more urgency, and in the bill, we of course support the $250. That was part of what we helped put together in the CARES Act. We support our small businesses, their entrepreneurial spirit, their optimism, their source of jobs and creation of wealth in our country. There was no question that we would be supporting that, but it took them a longer time than it should have to agree that we needed to make sure that even the smallest of small businesses would be included in that, and that we would be addressing our health needs because the key to our opening our economy, the key is testing, and we've got $25 billion, as you mentioned, and the $75 billion to our hospitals for all the purposes that serves. And so finally, they agreed to the package we put on the floor at the time. In fact, we even did more. In addition, that we can move on to the next phase if you wish now.
Does this take care of the rescue part as opposed to recovery? In the past, you've talked about rescue versus recovery, and talk specifically about state assistance to state and local governments. Do you regard that as part of a rescue or recovery, and what are the prospects of getting that done?
Well, I was placed in 3 phases. First, emergency, and that's what we did in the first few bills that we passed in March in a strong bipartisan way. We started with testing on March 5th. Here we are a month and a half later, and the administration has still not fully implemented it. After this bill, hopefully they will. So that was part of recovery. And then we went into mitigation, to mitigate for the damage to the economy with these initiatives to protect our small businesses, to provide more assistance in terms of health care and the rest. And now we have to go further into mitigation, unfortunately, to help state and local. Now, state and local means this. It means the healthcare worker, the police and fire, the first responders, the emergency services people, the teachers in our schools, the transportation workers who get vital, essential workers to work. Again, it's about the people. And these people are risking their lives to help save other lives, and now they're losing their jobs. So it's very essential that for our heroes, I call it our Heroes Act, that we have this assistance to state, county, local government, and to do so in a very significant way, to recognize the lost revenue that they have from lack of a stream of revenue because of the economy, and secondly, the outlays that they make in order to address the coronavirus tragedy.
So take us through, if you would,
again,
some of your thinking,
we're already working on that bill. Sorry. Excuse me.
Well, that's what I'd like to talk about, is that bill. Take us through your strategy in agreeing to this approach, leaving out state and local. You did get, as you said, hospitals, you got testing in and protection for some of the smallest companies. But did you run the risk, perhaps, of not getting the state and local assistance, certainly anytime soon? Because now we have Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, saying he thinks he's maybe sort of done, he's cautious going forward. Even Stephen Mnuchin, your partner in negotiating a lot of this, is saying he's not sure we need a lot more. Are you concerned we won't be able to get the state and local anytime soon?
Well, first of all, let me remind you, this is the same Mitch McConnell who said on the floor of the Senate 2 Thursdays ago, there's no way we're going to do anything but the $250, and now we're up to $480 that the Democrats were able to add for smaller businesses and for the health and well-being of the American people. So that's an interesting statement, but it isn't the fact. This is an interim bill. We didn't expect to have an interim bill, except after the Secretary's call. So we went from CARES 1, and then we're going to go into CARES 2. And CARES 2 would have been about state and local. So we got everything we asked for on the floor of the Senate and more 2 weeks ago. They should have agreed then instead of holding it up to what they agreed to yesterday. But in terms of state and local, the President himself has even said, and he tweeted out, I guess it was last night, that he's ready to do state and local, that he knows there has to be another bill. And there are other measures that are needed to be addressed in that legislation as well. It's going to be a major package. It's going to address, again, the needs of the states and localities, because that's where much of the healthcare delivery is, in public hospitals and the rest, as well as testing and that is in our bill that will be dispersed in some of it to many of the states out there, some of the money for testing, and also the lost revenue. This is a very important point. The lost revenue is something that we will have addressed in this next care package to recognize that piece of it, and that it has to be compensated for, and funds used, given to the states, can be used for that, because it is all coronavirus related, and everything we do is about coronavirus related. So it is with great optimism that we go forward with this. We're well down the path to do it. It was never intended to be an interim bill because we didn't know an interim bill would exist, but we used the interim bill to make the argument that this needed to be done as soon as possible, and it will.
As you say, it's all coronavirus related, which is terribly important. We obviously have a massive problem. Congress has already done a massive amount to try to address it. Are you concerned at all, and is there any way to protect against the possibility of politics entering into it? There were some reports that, for example, of the PPP, the first PPP that went out, that there was disproportionate amounts going to some states that, let's be frank, tend to vote Republican rather than Democrat. Can you do anything to make sure this is going to the places that need it the most rather than for some political reason?
David, unfortunately, I think that our audio is not working. All I heard you say was, are you concerned at all? And so I don't know what the rest of it was. But I'm not a person who gets concerned. I see everything as an opportunity. And I see this as an opportunity for us to be able to meet the needs of the American people in a way that takes us forward to open up our economy very soon. The key to that is testing, testing, testing. The key to that is testing and contact tracing and isolation. We know how to get it done. And that the sooner we do that, science is the answer to opening up government. And I wish that everyone would share that view. There has been a reluctance on the part of this administration to respect science, knowledge, data, evidence, and that's information and fact is how you make decisions. And there has also been a reluctance to accept the role of government in this solution. If you reject science and you reject governance, then you can see why we're in the situation that we're in. That's exactly what the president did from the start. It's a hoax, reject science. It's magically disappear, reject science. It's we don't have to do anything about it because it's going to go away, reject governance. And that delay and that denial cause deaths. And my concern is that we are working together in a positive way to support the lives and the livelihoods of the American people.
Madam Speaker, I apologize for the technical problems.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, it does largely, and it's great to have, but I'll try to speak up a little more. It's some technical difficulties here. But the question I was asking is, this needs to go for coronavirus, and specifically for need. How do we make sure that these funds, massive funds, are not distributed with any political reason involved? Because with the PPP, there was some suggestion more funds were going to some of the states that tend to vote Republicans. Are you confident this is going where it needs to go rather than where it might be politically exigent to go?
Oh, of course not. But anyway, I think the public display of it, as Abraham Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost everything. Without it, practically nothing. And the idea that they would have distributed those funds in a way that was not in furtherance of ending this pandemic is totally irresponsible, but not surprising, because they have rejected science and governance, as I said. So again, we will have a bright light shining on this, whether it's the panel set up by the CARES Act for a panel in the Congress of the United States. I myself tomorrow will be introducing a select committee on oversight for the coronavirus, strictly about coronavirus, and how everything functions in the best possible way, nonpartisan, non-political, science-based as we go forward. But I might add to that I do think that it's not too soon and should have been even earlier. We have to get ready for what comes next. How do we open up government? How do we do so in a way that does not contribute to a return of the virus? And if we have, God willing, a vaccine soon, how is that distributed? Not in a political way, but in a way that meets the needs of the American people. That would be sinful. But it is a challenge, and proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's what the Boy Scouts say. I wish the president would act like a Boy Scout in that regard and be thinking ahead, not just, and I'm prepared not to look back to some of his statements, but he cannot continue to misrepresent the facts to the American people and expect us to accept the deaths that go with that.
Okay, Madam Speaker, final question. Looking forward, the way you say we need to be doing seems exactly right. What do you look forward to in terms of an election in November? Do you have any sense of what that may look like, as you say, to make sure that people are safe, but they do get to express their views at the polls?
Well, I thank you for that. I don't think anything that we're doing now should have anything political about it. Every bill that we have passed has been strongly bipartisan, as 3 in March and then this additional bill. And as we go forward, it'll be bipartisan as well. But one of the things that we want in the new bill is more funding to protect the integrity of our elections. As you saw, the Intelligence Committee, in a bipartisan way, released a report saying that without any question, the investigation into the Russian interference into our elections was substantiated. It was nonpartisan. It was based on fact. The intelligence community tells us still the Russians are 24/7 trying to disrupt our election again. So we want to protect the integrity of our critical infrastructure of elections. We also want to be able to have people vote by mail. Especially at a time of concern about health issues, it's better for them to vote by mail, to get their ballot sent to them at home, to have same-day registration for those who do want to go to the polls, but to have the demand on poll watchers and the rest be much, much less. So we will be seeking additional funds. We had $400 million in the first CARES Act. We need much more than that now so that we can guarantee the integrity of our elections. So we're talking about the lives of the American people, the livelihood of our their livelihood and the strength of our economy, and the integrity of our elections, the life of our democracy. This is very, very important. Now, more than ever, more important to be able to vote by mail.
Madam Speaker, thank you so very much for your time today. That is Nancy Pelosi. She is Speaker of the House of Representatives.
My pleasure, David. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to talk about the present and the future for real estate with Jeff Blau. He's the CEO of Related Companies. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
When keeping track and keeping safe.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year. And it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face to face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Typical Danny. Yesterday was just one of those days. I was running late to dinner, so I had to do my makeup on the bus. But my favourite shirt got ruined when I spilt my foundation all over it. What a mare. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
This is the sound of Otto Sergey finding you a better energy deal.
No more, please, if you please.
While you get on with your life, Otto Sergey constantly searches the energy market. He will let you know when you could save, and then switching is up to you. Sergey, hurry up! You better not use all the hot water!
Oh, coming! Uh-oh, plugs.
Automate your energy with Otto Sergey. Compare the market. Keep life simple.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and to get you ready for the NFL Draft, you can listen to my podcast, First Draft, as Todd McShay, Chris Sproul, and I highlight all the top picks and give you the analysis you need leading up to the draft. Just search ESPN Radio today.
TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest editions.
And we did a ton of work to make it possible for people who have ongoing medical conditions to be able to get the services and the treatments that they need, while at the same time be able to deal with the surge and all the issues associated with managing COVID-19. I want to give a quick update here on testing. Yesterday, the Commonwealth conducted nearly 6,000 new tests, which brings our total tests statewide to about 175,000. The state reported 1,556 new cases of COVID-19 for a total of just over 41,000 positive cases. The last few days, we've seen fewer or about the same number of positive cases day to day, but we think it's too soon to draw a conclusion from that data. First, a few days does not represent a trend. We've seen this data bounce around before. And secondly, the number of positive tests is entirely dependent on who you test. And what I mean by that is daily positive test totals don't necessarily represent what's happening across the entire Commonwealth. Today's announcement on increased testing should help expand the universe of testing, and in many ways will be one more element of how we think about hotspots and opportunities to engage and to intervene. The piece of data we watch most closely is the number of hospitalizations for COVID-19. And we're still seeing an increase, a modest one, but an increase there statewide. Since the end of February, we've increased testing capacity dramatically through the State Public Health Lab and a wide range of lab partners at academic medical centers, commercial labs, the Broad Institute, and others. We now have more than 30 partners that are testing each day. Massachusetts remains a national leader in per capita testing, and we're continuing and committed to building on this work. Part of our statewide monitoring focuses on hotspots or high-density areas where the virus can spread quickly. And we've worked with local partners to address testing needs in several of these high-density areas. In Chelsea, Massachusetts General Hospital worked to quadruple testing capacity and to provide testing and housing developments. The Commonwealth, through the National Guard, also did mobile testing in Chelsea as well. In Lowell, we worked with CVS and the federal government to stand up a rapid testing pilot with the ability to test up to 1,000 individuals a day. The National Guard and Fallon EMS continue to test patients and staff at state hospitals, long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, and 24/7 congregate care programs here in Massachusetts. And prioritized testing is also available for our first responders, healthcare workers, and grocery store workers in Lowell, in Springfield, and Foxborough. Today we're going to expand those efforts at several more locations across the Commonwealth. In partnership with Quest Diagnostics and the Mass League of Community Health Centers, we will dramatically increase testing at several key community health centers here in the Commonwealth. As everybody knows, community health centers provide comprehensive health services for people across the Commonwealth. And these facilities are also deeply rooted in the fabric of their local communities. They're trusted partners in addressing the broad health needs of underserved populations. And they're committed to eliminating health disparities and facilitating access to health care for those they serve. Working with the Mass League, we've identified community health centers who have the capacity to ramp up testing in needs in areas of high need. And this includes many densely populated communities. Quest has agreed to ship 2,200 tests per day to 12 community health centers and is committed to adding more soon. The first group of health centers includes facilities and operations in Quincy, Brockton, Lowell, Fall River, New Bedford, Worcester, Provincetown, and multiple sites in Boston. The Boston locations are Dot House Health, East Boston Community Health Center, Codman Square Health Center, and the Whittier Street Health Center. Harbor Health Services will also have multiple sites coming online. People interested in being tested should contact these health centers this week. Each location is processing appointments differently. Soon you'll hear more about this from Manny Lopes, who's the CEO of East Boston Community Health Center. His community health center has already received 900 tests, and that number will continue to grow. I do want to say, Manny, how much we appreciate the work and the partnership that you and the folks at your organization have provided to us on numerous occasions over the course of the past 5 years. And we're very grateful to have you and your team step up to participate with us jointly in this particular initiative. This increased testing capacity is one crucial part of our response. Another key piece is community tracing. Massachusetts is the first state in the nation to launch a statewide community tracing collaborative to better track positive COVID-19 cases. Here, too, community health centers have an important role to play due to the deep connections with the cities and towns in which they operate. To date, more than 30 community health centers are participating in the Community Tracing Collaborative, working with us to trace contacts in the neighborhoods and the cities and towns that they know so well. By joining us in this program, some centers have even been able to bring back some furloughed staff, which is great news for everyone, as having experienced local staff working on the tracing initiative makes a big difference. And we're always glad to get people back to work, especially during these tough economic times. Over time, tracing is critical to helping us understand the spread of the virus and helping us return to the new normal. Integrating community health centers in our response and ongoing discussions is also an important part of that focus. And as a reminder, we need everybody out there to participate in this tracing program. We've been working with cell phone service providers to make sure that when our tracers make calls, they show up as MA COVID team and are not blocked by caller ID. Please pick up if you get that call. This is your opportunity to help stop the spread of COVID-19, especially perhaps in your house, apartment, or neighborhood. In closing, I know yesterday's news with respect to schools will remain closed throughout the year was yet another sign of how this virus has dramatically reshaped in so many ways our lives and our daily chores, rituals, and all the rest. Schools and businesses are being closed, people are staying home, and people are wearing masks. All a really good thing. But along the way, we're not being able to see loved ones in person, and it's disruptive and disturbing. I think everybody would like to see us find a way to get back into something that looks more like what people used to do day in and day out. But for Massachusetts, which is now a national hotspot for COVID-19 infections, we really do need to stay the course and keep up our efforts to stay home, socially distance, wear a mask, and respect and understand the issues associated with this virus. If we move too quickly, we risk losing the progress that we've made so far. And our healthcare workers in our hospitals, which have been working hard on our behalf, are pushing back against the virus, and they need us to push back too. We owe it to them, and we owe it to our parents and our friends and our neighbors to keep up the fight and to win. We'll get through this, and I believe we will come out stronger on the other side. But everybody needs to do their part and understand that we need the facts on the ground to drive a lot of our decision making. With that, I'll turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Listening to the governor of the Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's now taking Q&A. His main point throughout his talk today to stay the course and wait for a wise time to start restarting the economy. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio. Now we get back to Bloomberg's Balance of Power with David Weston. Okay, we do have some more information for you concerning what's going on with the markets today. Let's do that first. Stocks did halt the two-day slide as investors are digesting the latest round of corporate earnings, and optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy increased. Oil's up from record lows. The S&P rebounded from the worst sell-off in 3 weeks amid quarterly results that sparked speculation a recovery will be sooner rather than later. Let's get the latest on the numbers in the market. The S&P 500 is up 2.1%, up 58. Dow Jones Industrial Average is up over 2%, up 457. And the NASDAQ is up 2.3%, up 193. The 10-year is now down 18 seconds with a yield of 0.62%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is currently up 17.8% at $13.64 per barrel. COMEX gold is up 2.7% at $17.3340 per ounce. The dollar yen is at 107.86. The euro is $1.815, and the British pound $1.2302. Quick look at Netflix today, down 2.75% at $421.86 per share. General Motors is up 0.25% at $21.29, and Ford is up $4.76 per share, down 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash, and more information now. Back to Balance of Power.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you very much. President Trump has a warning for Iran. He's told the Navy to destroy Iranian gunboats that harass American ships at sea. Last week, 11 gunboats from Iran's Revolutionary Guard crossed the bows and sterns of American warships at close range. Federal health officials are confirming that the coronavirus killed 2 people in California in February. That suggests the illness was circulating in the United States weeks earlier than was originally thought. Officials say 2 people who died in Santa Clara County in February on the 6th and 17th. At that time, there were only 11 known cases of the virus in the United States. President Trump says the U.S. will begin reopening national parks amid the coronavirus outbreak. Speaking at an Earth Day event at the White House today, Mr. Trump said, quote, "You have a lot of land to open up." The president didn't say exactly when the parks would start to reopen. In the UK, 759 people died from the coronavirus in the past 24 hours. That's down from the day before. The country's preparing to start human trials for a vaccine of the disease. Government officials say they are increasingly confident the country has passed a peak in cases and deaths, but continue to warn of the possibility of a second peak. The UK has more than 134,000 confirmed cases. More than 18,000 people have died. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so much, Mark. Well, Michigan is one of the states that's been hit the hardest by the coronavirus. We're joined now by the Lieutenant Governor, and he is Garland Gilchrist. So, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense of where the virus is right now in Michigan. How bad is it? Are you still on the rise in terms of number of cases? And I'm sorry to say deaths.
Well, thanks to the important actions that Governor Gretchen Whitmer and I have taken, and that people have worked to stay home and stay safe, we have been able to, we believe, see our curve plateau as far as how the virus is spreading in communities across the state, and even in the hardest hit parts of our state, like the city of Detroit and its surrounding metropolitan area. So we believe that we're trending in the right direction, and we certainly are going to continue to be mindful and make policy decisions to continue to maximize public safety and maximize the reduction of this virus in our communities.
I'm glad you raised the issue of Detroit and the surrounding counties like Oakland and things like that. Is Michigan right now, in terms of coronavirus, is a tale of two states? That is to say, is it very different in the rest of the state than it is in Detroit and the immediately surrounding counties?
Well, it's very difficult to say that definitively because we are still working very hard to ramp up our testing capacity across the state. But yes, it has been shown that southeastern Michigan, where Detroit, Oakland, and Macomb counties are, have seen the highest number of confirmed cases and the highest deaths. And this has even visited me personally. I've lost 16 people in my life to COVID-19. So this is real for people, but we all know that we need to work together. This is everybody versus COVID-19 here in the state of Michigan. And so by keeping one another safe, by staying home, by practicing social distancing, we've issued orders to make sure that people are doing that in Michigan, and we believe that that is bearing fruit.
And I'm sorry for the loss of people in your life. We shouldn't just run over that. That's a big issue. Give us a sense of the extent to which you believe this may be because Detroit has a very large African-American population. I think 75% of your population, something like that. And there are indications that African-Americans are being hit harder by this disease than others.
Well, the state of Michigan was one of the first and remains one of the few states in the country to report out its coronavirus test results and deaths along racial and ethnic lines. And we chose to do that because we know that there have been health disparities in our communities for generations that have led to poor health outcomes. And so once we noticed and observed this trend here with the coronavirus, we decided to step up and take action. And Michigan became a leader by establishing our Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities, of which I am the chair. And we want to address several things. The fact that there are environmental factors that contribute to increased rate of infection, whether it's things like low air quality, but also the fact that so many people who are working on the front lines, our nurses and nurse assistants, our bus drivers, people at the grocery store, people who are working for utility companies, our first responders, they're more likely to be low-income Black people and people of color, and they are more exposed to this virus because of the nature of their jobs, and they're still working. So we're working to put interventions on the ground right now to help decrease their risk of infection, increase our ability to isolate, and so that we can stop the spread of the virus in the community. And that, we believe, will help to decrease the mortality rate amongst Black people. Black people make up 14% of the population in the state of Michigan as a whole, but we have made up 40% of the deaths in the state of Michigan. So it's important that we act and act now.
Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, this is first and foremost, obviously, about the health and the safety of citizens. There's also some economics involved. The city of Detroit is just coming out of a bankruptcy, just getting back on its feet. What kind of financial pressure is this putting on Detroit?
It's putting tremendous financial pressure on all of our cities and all of our states. The human services costs alone are going to be a big hit on budgets across the nation, and that is why we continue to advocate fiercely for more resources for state and local governments from the federal government, because we have to balance our budgets and they don't. And we need to make sure that money is not being put in front of people's survival right now. And so we're working hard to unlock the resources that we can at the state level to support individuals and families and small businesses, importantly. But we're going to need a lot more help from the feds to make that happen. But I know this. Detroit's a resilient city. I came back here home in 2014. And I've seen just the amazing beauty, not just the potential, but the reality of how much hard work and creativity exists in this city. We can get through this by working together. The state of Michigan will get through this by working together.
Yeah, for those of us who've known Detroit over the years, it's come back a long way. It's quite dramatic. At the same time, the report, there's a report on Bloomberg actually just today, that you're going to be short something like $358 million that you have to come up with in the next 16 months, or the state will take over the city. What are the prospects of that?
Well, again, the financial hit that's coming from this pandemic is something that is, for real, is unprecedented. And so we are working to plan for all these scenarios. But what's important to note is that, again, relief from this will need to come from the federal government to make sure the state and local governments have what they need. We have a big hole in our state budget because of this. We're going to have a big hole in city budgets across the state in communities large and small. So we don't have the answer on any of these questions yet because we frankly don't know how large the hole is going to be. But we're working hard to prepare for these worst case scenarios. And right now, the best way to do that is to advocate for the federal government through our congressional delegation and to the Trump administration directly to make sure that we get the resources that we need so our communities can get through this.
We're starting to see some states begin to experiment with opening the economy back up. Certainly Georgia has said they're going to open some things up as soon as this Friday. We even had in New York, our Governor Cuomo say that maybe elective surgery is possible in the upstate part, away from New York City. Is that possible? Are you starting to look at that for Michigan, given the fact that there may be a different situation in the southeast of the state as opposed to the rest of the state? Goodness knows, Upper Peninsula is a different world.
Well, first and foremost, people are going to drive our decisions. People's public health and public safety, because our economy can't come back without people being confident that they will be safe when they leave their homes. And in order to establish that, we really need three things in place. One is massively ramped up testing in every part of the state. We cannot understand community spread until we can test enough people, including people without symptoms. We've done a lot of work to make more testing available in the state of Michigan, but we need more from the federal government as well as we're trying to procure it from private sector sources across the country and across the world. The second thing we need is the ability to make sure that we can do contact tracing so that once people have tested positive, that we're able to find out who they may have potentially exposed so those people can get tested. And then the third piece is enabling people to isolate so that we can safely contain the spread of the virus. We need to make sure those three things are in place across the state before any region can think about coming back. And we're working on plans to establish that in Michigan right now. So we're going to be releasing some more details on that in the coming days. But those are the principles that we're going to need to follow so that we can open up responsibly and not cause a second wave.
Lieutenant Governor, we just talked with Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and she's confident that this $484 billion spending package will pass, which includes $25 billion for testing. Have you had a chance to look at that? Will that go a long way toward dealing with some of your need for testing?
I mean, every resource that's going to contribute to getting more tests in the state of Michigan and across the country is helpful to us to understand and respond to this virus. So I appreciate that. I know that we're going to continue to need more resources from the federal government for testing components, as well as for things like the Paycheck Protection Program, which I helped to launch here in the state of Michigan to support our small businesses. That ran out of money. Michigan businesses got about $10 billion, but that's nowhere near covering all the small businesses in our state that need the support. So we're going to continue to work with our congressional delegation to advocate for more in future coronavirus relief packages, but we appreciate any dollars coming into the state of Michigan.
Okay, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so very much for your time today. That's Garland Gilchrist. He is the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Michigan. Coming up here on Balance of Power, we're going to talk with Tina Smith, Senator from Minnesota, about this new spending bill and what more is needed for her home state of Minnesota. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This probably wasn't what you expected.
Deaths from the coronavirus continue to climb.
But now you need to become an expert fast.
For the very latest, we're joined live.
You'll do it with the latest information, and we'll be right here to help.
Are you concerned that the economic damage could linger longer than the virus itself?
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by the New Jersey Institute of Technology, offering an MBA that provides STEM professionals with a technology-focused experience. Learn more at njit.edu/MBA. Stocks halted a two-day slide as investors digested the latest round of corporate earnings, and optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy increased. Oil is up from record lows. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 2.3%, up 62. The Dow's up over 2%, up 473, and the Nasdaq is up 2.5%, up 211. The 10-year is down 20-30 seconds with a yield of 0.63%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 20% at $13.89 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 2.75% at $17.33.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.81. The euro is $1.0817. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. We now continue with Balance of Power and David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. The House is about to enact $484 billion in more spending to try to cushion us from the coronavirus. But many people think more yet is needed. We're going to welcome now Senator Tina Smith from the state of Minnesota. So welcome, Senator. It's good to have you here. What will this $484 billion do for Minnesotans?
Well, thank you, David. It's great to be with you, too. And I'm happy to talk about what we passed yesterday in the Senate and looks like is on its way to becoming law in the next day or so. It will provide a couple of things that are really important to Minnesota and really the rest of the country. The first is that it replenishes this small business loan fund that is getting help to small businesses. And I want to note that we made some important additions to what was originally proposed in the Senate by Senator McConnell, because we wanted to make sure that these small business forgivable loan resources are really getting down to those small businesses, the hair salon on Main Street and the family daycare provider who is really struggling to keep it all together right now. Those small businesses did not get a lot of the money in the first tranche of this Paycheck Protection Program, and we want to fix that. So to me, that's a really important part of the proposal that we passed yesterday. We probably are going to need to do more, but this will be really important to Minnesota businesses.
What about assistance to state government, local government? That did not make it into this package. A lot of people think that is needed. Is it needed in Minnesota?
It is going to be extremely urgently needed in Minnesota. You know, we also in the bill that we passed yesterday in the Senate included help to hospitals, and that will be important. But we wanted to get done help to state and local governments that are really bearing the brunt of this. And think about what that means. You know, these are state and local governments that can't deficit spend. They can't spend money that they don't have in the bank account. And I know this because I used to help run the city of Minneapolis in the state of Minnesota. And they are providing essential public services, police and fire, and the counties are doing all the work to try to find shelter for people who are experiencing homelessness. And these are services that we can't go without, and that is why the federal government needs to step in. And it's encouraging. I want to just say it is encouraging that though we didn't get this done in the package we voted on yesterday, there were signals from the president and the administration that they intend to move with the Democrats on that, and that is really makes me feel better.
We just talked with the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, and Michigan has been particularly hard hit. I think it's the fourth hardest hit in the union. Every state has been hit, but Minnesota not nearly as much yet, at least, as Michigan. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, we are experiencing, a lot of worry in Minnesota, and we've had, we still are seeing our case rates going up. But I really think it points to what we are doing well in Minnesota. Our governor has been very aggressive about early putting shelter-in-place orders. I think that Minnesotans are generally following those orders really well, and that is helping us to be responsive. We are also seeing that though we have cases in the hospital, we're managing those people so that they're not in the hospital as long as we were fearful that they would be. And so while every single person that we've lost in Minnesota around the country, that's somebody's loved one, and it is a tragedy. We are grateful that we are not seeing the increase as quickly as we're seeing in other parts of the country. But, even as I say that, we are looking at an outbreak down in Nobles County, in Minnesota. So Nobles County is right on the Iowa border. It's right by It's in Worthington, Minnesota, is in Nobles County, where we have a large meat packing plant facility, and we have now over 100 cases in Nobles County. And this is just an example of how nobody is immune from this, and we have to be doubly careful, even in pretty rural and agricultural counties like Nobles County.
It certainly is clear we can't let our guard down even for a second. At the same time, there is now talk, some consideration about starting to open up the economy somewhat. Georgia certainly is going to move on Friday. Even here in New York, Governor Cuomo said maybe we can have elective surgeries, at least upstate, away from New York City. Is it too soon for Minnesota to think about whether it might be able to open and back up part of its economy?
Well, I think a lot about what Dr. Fauci has said, which I think is for sure right, which is that this isn't going to be like a light switch, right, that flips on suddenly and everybody goes back to normal. It's hard to imagine what a new normal is going to look like. You know, in Minnesota, our governor in the last week or so has loosened some of the restrictions around outdoor activities like golf and fishing and putting docks in the water. And that makes sense because it doesn't require a lot of people being all close together. But I've got to say, I really worry about this idea that we can just go back to normal. And, we can't think about that really until we get on top of what we need to do with testing. And I just was listening to the Lieutenant Governor from Michigan talking about this adequate testing, also including the antibody tests that we need so we can see, okay, who's been infected and what can we learn about whether they've developed immunity to the COVID-19 virus, and what can we do around contact tracing. These are all things where, frankly, the federal government and the Trump administration has fallen down on the job, and we addressed some of that, I should say, in the bill that we passed yesterday, right?
Right. Yeah, a lot of work left to be done. I hope that some of that will go toward that testing phenomenon. Thank you so much. That's Senator Tina Smith, the Democrat from Minnesota. Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to have more with my interview with Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Earlier this hour, I got to speak with Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And one of the things I asked her was, is she sure that they're going to be able to pass in the House that $484 billion bill that's come out of the Senate?
No, we will be able to, in a very strong bipartisan way, to pass the legislation as it passed in a bipartisan way in the Senate. It's nothing extraordinary about how we will vote. Pretty standard fare, but we will take a recorded vote. In the Senate, they had unanimous consent, so they need a few senators to be there. We're 430 members now, and we'll need to have a quorum and a majority to get it passed, but we will.
An awful lot in this bill, something like $370 billion to replenish the PPP program, including through some smaller lenders, $75 billion for hospitals, another $25 billion for testing. What is not in the bill that you think still needs to be done?
Well, first, let me just say how pleased I am with what is in the bill, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so. 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of Treasury called me and said he needed $250 billion in 48 hours. That would mean that by tomorrow, 2 weeks ago, the Republican leader went to the floor and said it's $250 for the program, and that's it. We're not making any other additions. We objected. The Democratic senators objected. We worked together for our proposal. They objected to that, made a counter proposal, which was resoundingly rejected by the Republicans. And for 1 week, they refused to negotiate until about last Thursday. Then they realized that they had no chance just to do the $250. There was so much more urgency, and in the bill, we of course support the $250. That was part of what we helped put together in the CARES Act. We support our small businesses, their entrepreneurial spirit, their optimism, their source of jobs and creation of wealth in our country. There was no question that we would be supporting that. But it took them a longer time than it should have to agree that we needed to make sure that even the smallest of small businesses would be included in that, and that we would be addressing our health needs because the key to our opening our economy, the key is testing, and we got $25 billion, as you mentioned, and the $75 billion to our hospitals for all the purposes that serves. And so finally, they agreed to the package we put on the floor at the time. In fact, we even did more. In addition, that we can move on to the next phase if you wish now.
Does this take care of the rescue part as opposed to recovery? In the past, you've talked about rescue versus recovery, and talk specifically about state assistance to state and local governments. Do you regard that as part of a rescue or recovery, and what are the prospects of getting that done?
Well, I was placed in 3 phases. First, emergency, and that's what we did in the first few bills that we passed in March in a strong bipartisan way. We started with testing on March 5th. Here we are a month and a half later, and the administration has still not fully implemented it. After this bill, hopefully they will. So that was part of recovery. And then we went into mitigation, to mitigate for the damage to the economy with these initiatives to protect our small businesses, to provide more assistance in terms of health care and the rest. And now we have to go further into mitigation, unfortunately, to help state and local. Now, state and local means this. It means the healthcare worker, the police and fire, the first responders, the emergency services people, the teachers in our schools, the transportation workers who get essential workers to work. Again, it's about the people. And these people are risking their lives to help save other lives, and now they're losing their jobs. So it's very essential that for our heroes, I call it our Heroes Act, that we have this assistance to state, county, local government, and to do so in a very significant way, to recognize the lost revenue that they have from lack of a stream of revenue because of the economy, and secondly, the outlays that they make in order to address the coronavirus.
That was Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi speaking earlier on Balance of Power. Coming up next, we'll have a second hour of Balance of Power over on Bloomberg Radio, and there we will speak with Representative French Hill, Republican of Arkansas. He's been designated as part of the panel that's to oversee the nearly $3 trillion now that's being spent by the U.S. government to try to shore up the economy. That's coming up on Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury in the time of coronavirus. Economic gloom has yet to deter collectors of some of the French luxury industry's most sought-after products, handbags. Resales of Hermes and Chanel handbags have been stable in price and volume since the start of the crisis, according to Paris-based luxury consignment website Vestiaire Collective, which just sold a $64 million funding round. Hermes's Birkin and Kelly models, which start at just under $10,000, have increasingly been seen as an investment vehicle. Not that anybody has anywhere to bring a Birkin right now. As COVID-19 lockdowns stymie the busiest season for fundraising events, it's tuxedo tops and pajama bottoms as galas go virtual. It's a delicate line to walk with sobering economic, physical, and mental fallout, but organizers say such events may help diversify and broaden support. Attendees want to gather and feel productive and do some good. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
Would the medical crisis in any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, the things break.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community. Support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is an up Wednesday with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks halting a two-day slide as investors digest the latest round of corporate earnings. An optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy increases. Oil is rising from record lows. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up today by 20%, now at $13.92 a barrel. The 10-year down 17 seconds with the yield now at 0.62%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rebounding from the worst sell-off in 3 weeks. S&P up 56 now. That is a gain of 2%. The Dow up 418, up by 1.8%. NASDAQ higher by 198 points, higher now by 2.4%. And oil, as I mentioned, rebounding today. WTI, West Texas Intermediate crude up 20%. With more on the oil story and a look at other commodities, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Yes, WTI is still grappling with demand destruction and a supply glut amid the coronavirus pandemic. And gold prices are rising on haven demand. Bank of America predicts gold will climb as high as $3,000 an ounce in 18 months, while others say there's room for gold to appreciate, but it may not climb as high. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says he anticipates most of the U.S. economy will restart by the end of August after the coronavirus has led to social distancing measures that have shuttered many businesses. His remarks came on Fox Business. Netflix says the explosive growth in subscribers it posted last quarter, the strongest in its history, may not last beyond stay-at-home orders. Netflix shares down now by 2.9%. Snap soaring after the social media company reported results that were much stronger than anticipated. Snap shares up right now by 29.8%. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. Here he is, working from home, Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are higher, though not quite as much as U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 1.8%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 2%. Switzerland's ST Microelectronics has gained 8.6% in U.S. trading. The chipmaker's first quarter sales rose 7.5%, though it cautioned that second quarter revenue is poised to fall because of declining demand among automakers. Germany's BioNTech has gained almost 20%. The biotechnology company and U.S.-based Pfizer received German clearance for the country's first human trial of a potential coronavirus vaccine. The company said they expect approval for U.S. testing soon. France's Kering has lost 4.3%. The owner of Gucci and other luxury brands said first quarter sales dropped 16% before currency swings. The decline was steeper than an earlier estimate. Bank of America cut Kering to the equivalent of sell from buy. And Heineken has dropped 3.5%. The Dutch brewer reported that March sales volume fell 14% because of the effects of coronavirus. Heineken said it won't pay a mid-year dividend. Charlie?
Very much. Dave Wilson keeping track of those American depository receipts. And recapping, S&P up 54, a gain there of 2%. With Texas Instruments shares, they're up now by 2.9%. Texas Instruments advancing after quarterly results came in stronger than expected as customers stocked up on components. The chipmaker also gave an outlook that underlined uncertainty in the industry, but said it would build inventory to ensure the company can serve any snapback in demand. Kimberly-Clark shares soared to the biggest gain in nearly a decade on global stockpiling of its Scott bath tissue, Kleenex, Viva paper towels, and other consumer goods. Kimberly-Clark shares are right now, they are trading unchanged after that earlier advance. AT&T down now by 1.3%. It posted a 4.5% drop in revenue from a year ago. It also withdrew its forecast of 2% revenue growth for the year, saying it cannot provide a financial forecast for 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Delta Airlines is vowing to cut its daily cash burn in half as the carrier rushes to scale back operations amid a collapse in travel demand. Today, Delta reported its first adjusted quarterly loss since 2012. Delta Airlines shares today lower now by 4.4%. United Airlines will begin blocking middle seats in all aircraft cabins, joining an industry move to keep the center seat empty for the sake of social distancing in the pandemic era. Delta shares, they're down by 4.4%. United Airlines, UAL, down 7.1%. Among some of the other airline stocks, we have got American Airlines. It is down by 6.6%. Southwest Airlines lower now by just about 1.8%. So again, recapping, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, they are all advancing today, with the S&P 500 index up now by just about 2%. Lauren Sauer is Johns Hopkins University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine on Bloomberg Television this morning. She talked to us about whether enough people are being tested in the United States for the coronavirus.
I think the hope is that the numbers will increase in the next 30 to 40 days, but I think we just don't know yet. We have a lot of tests in the United States, but unfortunately I think they're not distributed in a way that allows us to do systematic and broad testing. And that testing is sort of the linchpin of all the other public health measures that we're putting into place. So we definitely need to ramp up testing, and we need to make sure testing is happening in these hardest hit places.
How do you see the lockdown ending? So do we just return to normal, or will there be very specific health measures of social distancing that need to be kept?
It's a great question. I think, everyone's looking forward to the lockdown ending, but we have to do it carefully or we'll be back right in this situation or possibly even worse after we reopen everything. Testing is going to be critical to ending this lockdown, and then you link that testing with quick access to care, contact tracing, which is identifying people who had contact with people who are sick, and making sure that they stay isolated or quarantined if they're not sick until they pass their possible window of getting others sick. Those are the key measures for sure.
Lauren, you're expert in emergency medicine, which I learned a long time ago is a process-driven event. You go from step to step to step to step. What part of the testing steps, plural, is the one that's the constraint? What's the thing that makes it so it's so darn hard to get tests done in this pandemic?
I think basically what happened is we had a not so great strategy, and then we executed that strategy in a not so great way, in a poor way, and so we were starting from behind from the get-go, and so now we don't have sort of this systematic approach to testing. It's a patchwork across the United States, and people are making their own decisions. They're working with what they have to get people tested, but it's not systematic, and no one has visibility on the whole system. And so there's breakdowns in where tests are being done, all the pieces that go to it, the reagents, the swabs. There's small breakdowns, and those small breakdowns add up quickly.
Exactly. So I say this with great respect for the exhausted people doing this every day. I hear the clapping in New York City at 7 p.m. It's coast to coast. Great.
Yeah.
Where is CDC in all this? I mean, when I was in school, it was always CDC to the rescue. Shouldn't CDC, with the full force of the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, and the President of the United States, affect a uniform test?
I absolutely think so. I think, we're hearing that from the federal leadership that there's enough tests, and that might be the truth. But because they're not spread out and implemented in that systematic manner, it doesn't matter. We need leadership from CDC. We need leadership from ASPR. We need leadership from NIH, all supported by the administration to roll out a broad and systematic testing program. Absolutely.
What can we do better in the U.S. to make sure there's enough personal protection equipment?
I think we need to look really hard at our supply chain, and we need to be careful about how we're using PPE closely. And one of the pieces of that is making sure that we don't reopen too quickly, so that we have time to build up our stores of PPE again. We have time to distribute it again before we see another increase in cases if we do open too quickly. So that's key for sure. And then training people to use it effectively and appropriately continues to be really, really important. So as new people come on to work, as new people come into the healthcare system, making sure they understand what it's for, how to use it, and how to be safe while putting it on and off.
Lauren Sauer, who is Johns Hopkins University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine, speaking this morning with Bloomberg Television's Francine Lacroix and Tom Keene about whether enough people are being tested in the United States for the coronavirus. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Again, an update on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing coming up. We will have a check of the markets for you. Martin Shkreli is asking a federal judge to release him early from prison, saying he has been, quote, conducting significant research into developing molecules to inhibit the coronavirus and would continue doing so if released. Shkreli says he suffers from asthma and allergies, which make him susceptible to contracting COVID-19 if he remains in prison. He was sentenced in March 2018 to serve 7 years in prison after being convicted of security fraud for lying to investors in his hedge funds and manipulating shares in Retrofin, Inc., a biotech company he founded. Well, some of the other stories that we are following for you today include the move in oil today, looking at West Texas Intermediate crude. What a rebound there today, surging today by 27.8%. WTI now at $15 a barrel. Brent, for comparison, $20.93, up today by 8.2%. Gold up 1.8% right now. It is at $17.16 the ounce. And again, we've got the 10-year down 17.30 seconds with the yield there of 0.62%. Balance of Power continues right here on Bloomberg Radio. Again, recapping the markets for you on this Wednesday. We've got the Dow up 402, up 1.8%. S&P up 54, up 2%. NASDAQ higher by 193, higher by 2.3%. We've got more with David Weston coming up. I'm Charlie Pellet. Thanks for joining us. This is Bloomberg.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the...
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year. And it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong. In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, NBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. 4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all rebounding along with the price of oil today. Let's begin with crude. Big story there, surging 26% right now, talking about West Texas Intermediate crude, now at $14.61 a barrel. Brent up now by 7.9%. The 10-year down 17.30 seconds. The yield on the 10-year, 0.62%. Bottom line, stocks halting a two-day slide as investors digest the latest round of corporate earnings. Lots to sift through. Also, optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy is increasing. And again, oil rebounding from record lows. Here's where we stand in terms of the equity markets. S&P up 56 right now at 27.92. That is a gain of 2%. NASDAQ higher by 202 points, up by 2.5%. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 427 points. That is a gain of 1.9%. Gold up 1.8%, $17.16 the ounce. So again, S&P rebounding from the worst sell-off in 3 weeks. S&P up 55 now, higher by 2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. I am Jason Kelly, stepping in for David Weston here on Balance of Power. Clearly, one of the biggest stories that we are watching today and every day going forward is about the aid that is coming from the federal government to prop up small businesses, to keep them alive, to try and keep this economy going as we move through this crisis. Congressman French Hill joins me, Republican from Arkansas. He is on the phone. Congressman, so good to have you with me.
Jason, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be with you.
Well, listen, I'm just happy to hear a Southern accent. I'm an Atlanta guy, trapped in New York, so this is great for me. Tell me where we are here, because oversight is going to be absolutely critical. What do we need to do? What does the American public need to know about how this will be executed?
Well, this is an unprecedented action by Congress to help economic preservation in the face of the virus, and an unprecedented amount of public money being spent. So accountability is critical. I was pleased that Leader McCarthy put me on the Oversight Commission, and that'll be the focus. What is the strategy of Treasury and the Federal Reserve for intervening in the economy to get us back on track as the virus recedes? And what is the transparency and what is the use of that money? So very similar, Jason, to the oversight process after the 08 and 09 crisis with TARP. Congress wants to make sure they know where the money is being spent and how.
And I have to ask you, just right as we get into this, though, that the president maybe not such a huge fan of oversight. Certainly rhetorically, he has made that clear. How do you walk that line in this case, Congressman?
Good question. The bill, the CARES Act, is very specific there. It stands up a separate IG, Inspector General at the U.S. Treasury Department. It has a pandemic coordinating body of all the inspectors general across the government in case they miss something between agencies or between programs. It has the General Accounting Office, the Government Accounting Office, the GAO, to propose to do several reports along the way publicly. And finally, this Oversight Commission. So the executive branch will be working diligently with the legislative branch on this oversight, and it'll come in a lot of different ways. This is more oversight, I think, than we had even after the 08-09 crisis and the TARP legislation.
Well, and obviously some crises are similar, other crises are different, and as you said, the size and scope of this one is pretty unprecedented. We've already seen, Congressman, some criticism, leveled at the government, leveled at specific companies, who've taken advantage of this. You had Shake Shack, a name familiar to a lot of us here in New York City, in and around New York City and across the country, having to give the money back. The president talking about Harvard yesterday in his press conference. Is there a certain amount of this that is just not going to go right and we have to live with that? How do you sort of get your arms around it?
Yeah, that's also a very good point. When you stand up these immense government programs quickly in just a few days to tackle the economic challenges brought about by the virus, there's no doubt that some of it's not going to go perfectly. The PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, stood up by Treasury and the SBA, is to help small businesses. But in that regard, Congress, led by Senator Rubio, made a specific exception for people in the restaurant business. So They said, look, we want restaurant people to have access to these funds. The question is, if you don't need it, should you apply for it? And that's where there's, I think, vagueness in the bill as drafted in the Senate. That could have been better. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Bottom line is, if you don't need this money to preserve your payroll, keep your business together during this pandemic, you probably shouldn't apply for the loan.
And so will further legislation be necessary, or is this a matter of essentially using subpoena power and basically sort of the threat of that in order to ensure good behavior here?
Well, again, our focus in the Oversight Commission is going to be on the use by the Fed and the Treasury of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. I think that's a much more heavily scrutinized aspect of this act. In the Paycheck Protection Program, I think you'll see the Inspector General at the Treasury be very engaged there. But the bottom line is these borrowers are signing an affidavit, a certification that they need this PPP money to stay in business, and that's what I think borrowers should consider when they sign those documents.
Only about a minute left here. Congressman, I got to ask you, how's it looking where you are on the ground? How are you sort of seeing this play out? Because we've got a lot of governors, especially in the South. I was just reading about the Alabama governor sort of going against some of her peers down in the Southeast. But give us a read on what it looks like in Arkansas.
Well, in Arkansas, we have over 2,000 cases. We've had just over 80 deaths. We have, just over around 40 deaths. I don't have today's numbers. We had about 80 in the hospital the last time I looked, with about 20 or 30 on ventilators. Governor Hutchinson's been very judicious in this, Jason. He's closed the businesses and the gatherings that he thinks stop the spread, but he's allowed businesses that could use the CDC standards to stay open. And as a result, our curve has been bent down. We have hot spots, one of which is in our state prison, but we've done a pretty good job, and I think he's maintained balance in what's closed and what's open. That may make it easier for Arkansas to open up in the weeks ahead.
Well, here's hoping. We really appreciate your time, Congressman French Hill, Republican from Arkansas, going to be part of this oversight that is going to be critical going forward as we manage through this crisis. Our thanks to him. Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to get a look at the health side of this. Going to stay in the South, head to Georgia State University. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are up as investors digest the latest round of corporate earnings news. The Dow is up 407 points, NASDAQ up 195, S&P 500 adding 55. Toilet paper makers have never seen anything like this. Kimberly-Clark is reporting its best sales growth in a decade. The maker of Cottonelle and Scott toilet paper says sales of those items jumped 13% during the first quarter. But shares of Delta Airlines are down 2% after reporting a $534 million quarterly loss as travel demand collapsed amid the coronavirus pandemic. And there's growing concerns of our meat supply. The Tyson Foods pork plant in Iowa is the third major U.S. meat plant to close down as the coronavirus sickens workers. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The market's in focus.
Tonight, it's a Lotto triple rollover. Don't miss out. Play your numbers online or on the app today. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Oh. Just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? Night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya. Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
The football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Yesterday was just one of those days. I was running late to dinner, so I had to do my makeup on the bus. But my favourite shirt got ruined when I spilt my foundation all over it. What a mare. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
And I'm Jason Kelly in for David Weston. Coming up, we are going to chat about the South a little bit more, head down to Atlanta to talk about some diverging opinions among that part of the country as to what to open, when to reopen it in the face of a lot of big questions. But first, let's get a check on the business day with Charlie Pellet.
All right. Hi. Thank you very much, Jason Kelly. We'll catch back up with you top of the hour. You and Carol Messer, of course, from Bloomberg Business Week, 28 minutes from now. Here's where we stand. Stocks higher across the board. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, they are all surging as equities halt a two-day slide. Investors digesting the latest round of corporate earnings amid optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy. Oil rising from records. West Texas Intermediate up now by 27.4%, $14.74 a barrel on WTI. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is sketching out a timetable for reopening the U.S. economy in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. And with more on that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The Treasury Secretary tells Fox Business it will be a gradual effort, and he anticipates most, if not all, of the economy will be in gear by the end of August. The economy has lost 22 million jobs since late March. Economists are forecasting Thursday's jobless claims report will show workers filed another 4 million claims last week. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
S&P 500 index up now by 60 points. That's a gain of 2.2%. We've got the Dow up 451, higher by 2%. NASDAQ up 215, up by 2.6%. 10-year down 16.30 seconds, yield 0.61%. Gold up 1.6%. 17.30 the ounce. Closely watched WTI up 26%, now at 14.57 the barrel. Some of the other story stocks that we're following for you today. LB shares are plunging. That's the parent of Victoria's Secret. Sycamore Partners wants to terminate its deal to acquire a controlling stake in Victoria's Secret, according to a court filing. Today, LB plunging by 22.4%. After last night's earnings report, Netflix down 2.8%, Snap surging by 30%. Recapping, S&P higher, up 60, up 2.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. Here he is for the Wednesday edition, David Weston.
Yeah, better late than never. Thank you so much, Charlie. Thank you so much to Jason Kelly for stepping in there. We had some technical difficulties. But right now, we want to talk about Georgia, just the way Jason Kelly said we would. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has announced that this Friday, some businesses in his state can open up again, including things like gyms, hair salons, and bowling alleys, subject to some social distancing restrictions. Some people have questioned whether this really makes a lot of sense. And we go now to Dr. Harry Hyman. He's professor at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University. So thank you so much, Dr. Hyman, for being with us. Give us your take initially. Is this too much too soon? Dr. Hyman. Dr. Hyman, I'm sorry. We lost Dr. Hyman. We're going to work on trying to get him back together. The coronavirus affects all of us, and many much worse than what we're experiencing. But I must say, there are technical glitches on TV and on radio. And now I'm told Dr. Harry Hyman is back with us, I'm delighted to say, professor at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University. What I was asking Dr. Hyman was, we understand that the Governor Kemp in Georgia is starting to open up some businesses this Friday. Is he right to do that, or is he getting a little bit ahead of himself?
So I have a feeling you think I'm Dr. Hyman, but this is actually your next guest, Mike Levitt, and the technical difficulties you're talking about continue.
Are much more replete than I knew, but I'm delighted to hear from you, the former governor of Utah and also the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Thank you very much, and thank you for correcting me. We'll get this straightened out sooner or later. So let's talk about exactly what's going on in Utah, but across the country. One of the reasons I love talking with you is you both run a state, but you've also been a leader at the federal level. Talk about the state first. We now have this new $484 billion spending package. It's expected to be approved by the House this coming Friday. Wednesday, if not Thursday. How will that affect Utah, if at all? Does Utah need this help?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's a business in America that's not deeply stressed and concerned about where they are going forward. I think what you were beginning to talk about in Georgia is the same conversation that's happening in Utah, it's happening in California and in Kansas and in Illinois and Michigan. This is a very complex set of problems we face. If I could illustrate it for you, I would say this. Assume you're on the edge of, on a winter day, it's early December, and you have a dilemma because it's getting dark and cold, and if you don't get across a lake, you're going to be unsafe. In fact, you could die. And the dilemma is, do I walk out onto this new ice and walk across this frozen lake, or is it just not thick enough? And so what do? You take a step or two out, and you stop and listen for cracks. And if you don't hear any cracking sound, you take more steps. And then you stop, and you wait to see if there's more cracking sound. That's where we are in the economy right now. We don't know. We don't know how this virus is going to perform or happen. We're doing well in most states like Georgia or in Utah. In fact, we're ahead of all the models. We're performing substantially better than the models. What we don't know right now is, were the models flawed and too pessimistic, or are we having great success with our social distancing measures? And if we begin to back off that, will the virus party and suddenly we'll be falling through the ice metaphorically and in a much worse situation than we were before? We're all just plodding our way across this frozen lake.
Well, to pick up on your analogy of the ice cracking, are we in a position to hear whether the ice starts cracking? And I'm getting to testing, obviously, because some people say we don't have the testing capability yet ramped up to be able to do it and do it accurately on a massive scale. And so if, in fact, we are going too fast, we won't know it until too late.
That's just like walking out on the ice. The further you get out, the more dangerous it is. And that's the reason we're having this debate between the economy and the health of our country. And both are legitimate, and neither one of them can be done in the exclusion of the other. And so, can we hear it? Well, we may not hear it perfectly, and we're working hard to get our listening devices out there more consistently, but we are where we are, and we can't allow the economy to atrophy, so we're starting to take some chances. And maybe they're not chances we'd like to take, but the reality is they're chances we probably have to take. And we'll learn from each other. That's the reason that doing this on a state-by-state basis is a far better response than doing it everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, it's the laboratory of the states that's been talked about for some time in different contexts. At the same time, there are some people who say that we really should be ramping up federally and coordinating at a federal level for a much larger campaign for testing. There's a Rockefeller Institute report out that basically says we should appropriate $100 billion and really recruit as many as 100 to 300,000 people to help with the contact tracing. Does that strike you as overkill?
Let's talk about what the federal government does well and what they don't do well. What they do well is they collect money and disperse it out to states. They do that very well. What they don't do well is orchestrate anything on a national basis. And I say that as a person who's run a state, as you say, and HHS. What we have got to do is have testing on a state-by-state basis that's responsive to the needs of that state. And then the results of that needs to go back to CDC. Another thing the federal government does very well is it accumulates information and provides everyone with situational awareness. That's what what the federal government should be doing. And should the federal government be offering more testing dollars? Absolutely. And they got $25 billion in the in this supplemental 3.0 or 3.5 rather that just passed. We'll see if that's enough. I suspect we'll be back doing more.
Do you think Utah is going to be one of the first states to get back going?
Well, there's very good reason to believe that we're outperforming the models. And the same question I posed before, are we outperforming the models because people did a really good job in this state, social distancing. I'm sitting in my office where I've worked for the last 6 weeks at home.
I know the feeling. It's part of our technical difficulties as I work from my basement here. Thank you so much to Mike Levitt. He's former governor of the state of Utah, former Secretary of Health and Human Services. Coming up next, we are going to go to Georgia. After all, we're going to talk to Dr. Harry Hyman, professor at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Are you interested in a challenging...
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from,
we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking,
which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help.
Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all of your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find the Your New Episode section to see the latest additions.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all advancing. Stocks halting a two-day slide as investors digest the latest round of corporate earnings. Also, optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy is increasing. Oil rising from record lows. Right now, West Texas Intermediate crude up 20%, up $2.40 a barrel at $13.94. Gold up 1.8%, $17.14 the ounce. The 10-year, the yield there 0.62%. S&P up 61, higher by 2.2%. The Dow up 441, up 1.9%, and NASDAQ up by 222 points. For NASDAQ, that is a gain of 2.7%, and again for the Dow, up now by 1.9%. After earnings, Netflix down 2.6%, Snap shares up by 30%, Texas Instruments up by 3%. Among the companies reporting after the bell, Alcoa. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that, David Weston, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has announced that this Friday, some businesses in his state can open up again, including things like gyms and hair salons and bowling alleys, subject to social distancing restrictions. Some have asked whether this may be too soon. We welcome now Dr. Harry Hyman, professor at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University. So, Dr. Hyman, thank you so much for joining us. Give us your sense as an expert in public health. How do you judge whether it's too soon to open up?
Well, thanks for asking that question, David, because that's actually something I've been discussing with media locally in Georgia as well. And, I think there are some key things that need to be in place before you can feel comfortable relaxing some of the social distancing. There are a number of kind of pillars. One of them is testing. As you may or may not know, Georgia has actually been consistently behind the curve in terms of the number of tests performed and the ability to perform testing in a way that's accessible across our state. Just for some relative numbers, we've performed about 90,000 tests in Georgia. If we look at Texas, they've done more than twice that number. Florida, about 3 times that number. And in order to get your arms around the epidemic, you have to know how many people are out there, both symptomatic and asymptomatic. In Georgia, we haven't begun testing anyone without symptoms, and we're still struggling to do enough testing to test everyone with mild to moderate symptoms. So we really don't know what we need to know. The other thing we don't know is, about 30% of the population of Georgia is African American. We know, looking at data in Georgia and across the country, that African Americans are being disproportionately affected. In Georgia, we only have that data for about 50% of the cases so far. So again, a lot more information we need to know to understand where we are. The other thing that's critical is having adequate personal protective equipment. We've been struggling to have enough for frontline healthcare workers in hospital settings. Now we're talking about opening up not only medical and dental practices, but massage therapists, hair salons, fitness centers, where employees, for their own protection, and people going those places will need some of that same protective gear without a clear plan to source that. And the third, and I would say maybe most important thing is we don't have the public health infrastructure in place. And what I mean by that is we in Georgia, maybe more so than the rest of the country, but probably also true for the rest of the country, has underinvested in public health for years. If we look at health spending, prevention and public health are about 3% nationally. As a result, we don't really have the infrastructure in place and the workforce in place that we'll need to go to the next phase. Once you start loosening social distancing, then you need the ability to have rapid case identification and containment with contact tracing. That requires very active boots on the ground, and we're in no place near to having that. And last, we have some surge capacity for hospitals in the metro Atlanta area, but as we saw with a horrible outbreak in southwest Georgia in Dougherty County and Albany, Georgia, the rural hospitals have really been doing poorly over the last 10 years, in part reflecting our decision not to expand Medicaid. And as a result, they're really unprepared for what may be coming ahead.
Doctor, pick up for a moment on contact tracing as one specific instance, because they're doing this now, or at least trying to do up in the state of Massachusetts. Charlie Baker brought in Partners in Health and Dr. Paul Farmer to do that. What kind of personnel do you need to do that? There's a Rockefeller Institute report, I don't know if you've seen it, but calling for there to be a national COVID workforce to really do the contact tracing, saying we could need as many as 100 or 300,000 people nationwide to do this. Is that realistic?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's unclear right now what combination of boots on the ground and technology we'll be using. South Korea has used a lot of technology to help with tracing. Some of the things they're able to do there might be less acceptable from a privacy perspective in this country. But the example you gave of Massachusetts is a great one. And it's an example of a state that's being very proactive in their planning and ramping up public health infrastructure as they prepare for the next phase of containment. And their plan is to train 1,000 people. Based on our population, that would mean training about 1,500 people in Georgia. And we haven't begun to do that. We have a plan in place. The Commissioner of Public Health has reached out to schools of public health, including Georgia State University, where I'm on faculty, and asked us to identify graduate students who could work with the Department of Public Health. And we're doing that, but even across the schools of public health, that's on the order of several hundred, where what we need is at least 5 times that number. And again, they're only talking now about developing the training videos and preparing that workforce. Yet they're talking about loosening restrictions and opening businesses in several days.
So take us back to first principles, that is to say what the governor of Georgia, Mr. Kemp, is doing there. President Trump and his task force set out guidelines, these 3 phases in terms of bringing the economy back together. I thought that in order to get to phase 1, you had to have a decline in numbers over some period of time, I think 2 weeks or so. Is that the case in Georgia? Because I've heard conflicting reports.
Well, first recognize that the guidelines in opening up America again are essentially an 18-page PowerPoint. So lots of room for interpretation, and they have what they call gating criteria, which call for a 14-day downward trajectory in symptoms, cases, and hospital capacity. And if your question is, do we have a document?
Does Georgia have that? Yeah, the question is, do you have that in Georgia?
The short answer is no. We do not. And at the press conference a couple of days ago, the commissioner said that she felt confident that by the end of the month, which is the time that they will be, they're planning to do away with the shelter in place, that we would be there. So I think the critical point here is we haven't even achieved what I would say are very liberal gating criteria, and yet we're in this rush to start opening things up, which is a problem and a great concern.
Is the governor listening to public health experts?
Certainly not in the way that I'd like him to.
Okay.
And I think he's listening to other voices maybe more loudly.
Right. Sounds like that may be right. Okay, many thanks to Dr. Harry Hyman. He's professor at the School of Public Health at Georgia State University. That does it for Balance of Power for today. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Daybreak 8.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 1954, the NBA adopts 24-second shot clock and 16 foul rules.
Face Toronto, they are going to let the shot clock run out.
So they should get the ball back, and that's a foul off the basket.
Right, you get a free throw.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn. To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. It's Earth Day. I'm Carol Messer, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. And Jason, we've got stocks actually up after a couple of down days. Airlines leadership, new stimulus, certainly front and center. And we've got a roundup of leaders to talk about all of that.
Well, and it's interesting to think about sort of this collision of sorts of earnings, maybe a little bit of optimism on the health side that we're starting to see. And as you say, more rescue financing coming from the government. And we've got it covered from all sorts of angles. A lot of leaders weighing in throughout the next few hours.
All right, first up, let's get a check on your top business stories. And really, let's get a check on that trading day. Here is Charlie Pell.
Hi, thank you very much. Here's what's going on. Green on the screen. Stocks halting, as you mentioned, a 2-day slide. Investors digesting the latest this round of corporate earnings. By the way, we'll be hearing from Alcoa, among many other companies, after the bell today. Also, a lot of optimism about the eventual reopening of the economy. Oil rising from record lows. Let's begin there. West Texas Intermediate crude up now by 1.9%. Looking at an advance, actually up by 20.5% on WTI now. Up $2.33 a barrel, $13.89. Brent up 5.2%, $20.33 for a barrel of Brent. Gold up 1.7%. Right now higher by $28 the ounce at $17.14. The 10-year down 17.30 seconds with a yield of 0.62%. S&P up 62, up 2.3%. The Dow up 458, up 2%. NASDAQ up 228, up now by 2.8%. Lots going on. That is the latest from the market desk. I'm Charlie Pellet. Now back to you, Carol and Jason.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This portion of Bloomberg Business Week is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. And coming up, as we mentioned, Carol, we're going to hear from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She caught up with David Weston. We're also going to talk to the chairman of JetBlue, a legendary investor who's worked all over the world, Henry Cornell. Also, a couple of CEOs, and I'm going to say it, and maybe you're going to be upset with me, the author of my favorite book.
I know. Actually, I believe it's the author of Alice's favorite book, but we'll talk about that. He's also doing some incredible work when it comes to individuals who have been incorrectly, wrongly incarcerated. So we're talking about Jason Flom. He also is the founder of Lava Records. So looking forward to see what he has to say. First up, though, let's set the Business Week agenda on this Wednesday. Kriti Gupta, is Markets Live reporter at Bloomberg News. She's back in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Dave Wilson with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News on the Access line in New Jersey. So Dave, let's start with you. Set the tone, because we've had a couple of down days this week so far, but we've got a rally underway.
We sure do, and it's a pretty broad-based one as well. I mean, you look at the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, they're all higher. You know, technology stocks leading the way, which we've certainly seen a lot of over time. Energy companies doing relatively well, too, which we haven't seen, especially in light of what the oil market has been through lately. So, you know, a bit different on that score. Some well-received earnings reports. I mean, you've got the biggest gain in the S&P 500 for Chipotle Mexican Grill. Their numbers were out late yesterday. People liked them. Similar story with Snapchat's owner, Snap. So you're seeing social media companies do well. Facebook has that going for them, plus the fact that they invested $5.7 billion in an Indian company trying to expand their business there. So, you know, put it all together. I mean, there's certainly a lot of positives to sort of counter the negatives that we dealt with the last couple days.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely a different tone, right?
Absolutely. And one of the big negatives, obviously, has been this oil trade. We've all been looking at it, trying to make sense of it. Kriti Gupta, come on in here. Give us the latest, and also the necessary kind of why it matters to not just an everyday consumer, but an everyday investor, this move downward that we've seen in the oil market.
Sure. So what's been notable about this week, Monday, crude prices dropping into negative territory, a historic moment, of course. We all kind of know that happened. What's really important to note, though, is it happened because of ETFs. And what I mean by that is essentially investors, I'm going to break it down here, make it really simple. Investors basically came into the market, bought ETFs through the stock market, and held on to the underlying oil contracts. So these people that are kind of pulling the price lower on crude aren't actually your traditional commodity investors. They're actually stock investors. They're your traditional mom and pop, day traders. You know, your friends investing through Robinhood. It's those kind of people that are actually driving oil lower, and they were on Monday. And what's interesting is they're actually trying to call a bottom in oil prices because they're just in disbelief that oil prices can even be this low. So you're really seeing the ETF world, the stock world kind of collide here with the commodities world.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what's going on here. I mean, it's really been kind of a wild week when we look at what we've seen in the energy market so far, where we are in the equity markets. Dave, I want to ask you, do you feel like we're starting to get folks thinking about, okay, what happens after this? What does it mean for companies? What does it mean for earnings? And ultimately, what does it mean for the financial markets? And I do wonder how much of that optimism is already to some extent priced in.
Well, there's an element of that, no question. There's also an issue of what does the here and now look like? And I come back to Snap because, you think about companies like that, and Facebook and Twitter certainly qualify. A lot of their business comes from advertising, and we've seen more broadly that the ad business just isn't what it was before the coronavirus really hit because business isn't what it was. So the idea, that Snap's numbers look relatively well to investors, that tells you something. Plus the fact that there's, shall we say, a lot more engagement with these kinds of sites, simply because people got to have something to do while they're sitting at home in a lot of cases. So, you have that in the backdrop. As far as what happens in the future, we're still seeing companies left and right withdrawing their forecasts for the year, so it gets kind of hard to get a handle on that. A company like Kimberly-Clark, which, let me tell you, they're selling toilet paper, so they did okay in the first quarter.
Right.
They're pulling out their forecast for the year and suspending their stock buybacks, so no surprise there. Put it all together, once you get past where we are now, it's still sort of a murky outlook.
I don't know why anybody would leave a forecast out there at this point.
Yeah, why? You don't have to at this point, right?
It is far from required, and I would say it's bordering on discouraged. So, Critty, last word to you. Play this out, what you mentioned with oil and ETFs, because this is bigger than the oil market in many ways, and this is a world where an individual investor is pretty worried about his or her retirement.
That's right. And it's actually what's interesting here is this kind of collision that I mentioned earlier about kind of the stock market and the oil market. You're actually seeing it play in reverse, too. So you're actually seeing not just the stock market and these ETF exposures hit the energy market, but vice versa. The energy market has really been kind of that second punch in the 1-2 punch that markets were really dealt with after the virus, that price war really hitting that. And you're actually seeing that sentiment reflect in stocks as well. So now this kind of commodities-only story has really become a sentiment story as well. And that's why you kind of have your regular 401k people really worried about kind of what this means for their futures.
Added to the list of markets with dislocation as a result of the virus and maybe some other deeper things that have been going on in the financial markets.
All right, Critty Gupta, thank you so much. Markets Live reporter for Bloomberg in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. I haven't said that in a while. Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg, will be back with our chart and stock of the day in just a bit. You want to do the bite?
Yeah, let's do it. The Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day. One number that tells us a lot. Today's number, nice and round and big, $10 million. Amazon says it will contribute $10 million, Jason, to projects designed to encourage sustainable forestry in the Northeast U.S. that includes a program that connects smaller landowners to carbon credit markets to protect land from the development of agriculture, which is, kind of appropriate this bite on Earth Day.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to celebrate Earth. And listen,
you look. How much is that company worth?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll see.
Not to look a gift horse in the mouth.
That's right. It is amazing.
I'm in a tough mood today.
Buckle up, everyone.
Get ready.
I know I am. All right. A lot more ahead. We're going to hear from top minds in investing, in transportation, and in the record business even. But before we get to any of that, let's get world and national headlines. For that, we turn to Bob Moon. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Jason. As parts of the U.S. and other countries begin to reopen, the World Health Organization is today warning anew that most countries are still in the early stages, and what's more, the UN group says some countries are seeing a resurgence of cases. In Geneva today, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the virus remains extremely dangerous.
Make no mistake, we have a long way to go. This virus will be with us for a long time.
President Trump on Twitter today said he has instructed the Navy to, quote, shoot down and destroy any and all Iranian gunboats if they harass our ships at sea. Last week, small Iranian gunboats came close to U.S. Navy ships in a manner the Navy called unsafe and unprofessional. At today's Pentagon briefing, Deputy Defense Secretary David Norquist said the president is sending Iran a message.
What he was emphasizing is all of our ships retain the right of self-defense, and people need to be very careful in their interactions to understand the inherent right of self-defense.
President Trump did not cite a specific Iranian provocation in his tweet or provide details. Senior Pentagon officials gave no indication that Trump had directed a fundamental change in military policy on Iran. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
To be in the markets now, you need nerves of steel.
I mean, we're not supposed to be hysterical.
And Bloomberg surveillance.
Let's just start with something extreme.
What are you comparing this to?
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Your call, your message to your clients on a morning like this morning.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
What are you doing to adjust your economic growth numbers?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
Fiscal stimulus could really shape things in the months ahead.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
What if you could keep the top economic...
Just this wall and that one to do, Dave, and then we're done. Whoop! Oh, no!
Hello, Steve the Sparky.
Pass us that roof tile, Chris.
Yep, sure. I'll be fun.
Oh, no. Saved by the gutter. Built to rough it with contractors. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
The loungewear essentials that ease you into your comfort zone. The Fitbit that helps you step up your fitness goals. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can enjoy being the best possible you. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative. With the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck and it's new problem solved.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to national lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Paletta. An update on Wall Street. Stocks halting a two-day slide as investors digest the latest round of corporate earnings. Also, there's optimism about the eventual reopening of the U.S. economy. We've got crude oil rallying today. West Texas Intermediate looking at an advance now of 22%, back above $14 a barrel on WTI. The S&P 500 index is up now by 60 points. That is a gain of 2.2%.